Chapter 800. Kill Jia Ming. With the decision made, the three divided the work. With the strength of Su Xiu Ran and the others, even if it was a sneak attack that caught them off guard, they would be able to react very quickly. As long as the five of them joined forces, it would be difficult to kill Jia Ming. Ling Han had the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, so how could it be that these five people didn't have a trump card? However, unleashing a trump card required time, so these five people would ambush here. However, how could they have imagined that Ling Han actually had a treasure like the Black Tower that could accommodate living beings, and it itself was as small as a mustard seed? Even they didn't discover it in the slightest. Attack! Ling Han brought the two girls to appear, and they all charged towards Jia Ming. What? Su Xiu ran and the others were greatly shocked. What was going on? How could Ling Han and the others appear out of thin air? But in this moment of shock, Ling Han and the others had already charged towards Jia Ming. Ling Han unleashed a sword, Hun Yo unleashed a claw, and Helian Sun Shui unleashed a fist. With the condensation of dragon qi, added with her powerful physical strength, the power of this fist was extremely terrifying. Want to kill me? You guys aren't qualified. Jia Ming immediately reacted. In such a short time, he couldn't unleash a treasure, and could only guard with his fists in front of his body, pushing his origin power and physique to the strongest at the same time. Qi, Hun Yo was the fastest. With a wave of her small hand, she immediately left a deep bloody mark on Jia Ming's body. Even if Jia Ming had a physique of 9th-tier rare metal, it was useless, and he was instantly heavily injured. Then it was Helian Sun Shui. She similarly learned the Thunderclap 9th Heaven, and her speed was even above Ling Han's. With a punch, Piyu, Jia Ming instantly violently vomited blood. Her strength was only above Jia Ming's, and added with the true dragon bloodline, how terrifying was her battle prowess. Jia Ming's figure staggered. His physique was truly tyrannical, taking the attacks of two great elites head-on under the circumstances of a sneak attack and not dying. He used the combination of toughness and softness of his physique to dissolve most of the destructive power, but his face was still extremely pale. Ling Han was the last to arrive, his sword stabbing straight at his opponent's back. Ling Han, you can't kill me, Jia Ming said sternly. He had already neutralized two sneak attacks, and Su Xiu ran and the others had already made their moves. As long as he neutralized Ling Han's attack, it would immediately become the five of them fighting Ling Han's group of three. The situation would be reversed in an instant. Moreover, they had brought along a terrifying killing weapon. Originally, it was used to deal with the powerful monsters in the ghostly dragon cave, but it was more than enough to kill Ling Han. He stretched out his hands, wanting to grab hold of Ling Han's sword and force it to stop. Only a body cultivator like him would dare to do such a thing. Otherwise, who would dare to use their bare hands to grab the Revere Life Sword? There was basically no need to grab it head-on, the swift and fierce sword Qi would be able to sever all 10 fingers at the same time. Ling Han's mind was empty. Only the pure sword intent was circulating around the long sword. Puff Jia Ming grabbed the blade of the sword, but he couldn't stop the momentum of the sword at all. His 10 fingers were like tofu as they were sliced into pieces and danced in the air. The tip of the sword pierced straight through his heart. This was known as the world's #1 killing sword. How could he survive being pierced directly at his vitals? Under the impact of the murderous aura, Jia Ming instantly spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared blankly at Ling Han, as if he couldn't believe that such a powerful being like him actually couldn't block a single strike from Ling Han. However, under the impact of the Revere Life Sword, his figure immediately tilted, and he fell to the ground. A prodigy of a generation, an existence that had once left his name on the martial arts stone, died just like that, without even having the chance to use any ultimate moves or trump cards. Ling Han reached out and grabbed, storing Jia Ming's corpse into the Black Tower. This person definitely had a spatial spirit tool on him, and now there was no time to search, but how could he waste it? At this time, Su Xiu ran and the others finally arrived. Although they were all king tiers of the younger generation, being attacked so suddenly, it was already not bad to be able to have such a reaction. Ling Han laughed loudly and turned around, unleashing the desolate hell sword technique. This sword technique excelled in defense in the first place, and it instantly spread out endless sword light, forming a defense in front of him, Hellion Sun Shui, and Hunyo. Ding, 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 in a series of clashes, both sides retreated. The first wave of confrontation ended with the success of Ling Han's side's sneak attack, but now both sides returned to the same starting line. Su Xiuran and the others still had as many as 4 people, and each of them could be called the strongest battle prowess in the heaven tier. You actually killed Jia Ming. Dong Ling said sternly, her beautiful eyes flickering with the flames of fury. Ling Han shrugged, and said, you speak as if you guys are here to welcome me. You guys did the same thing, so you won't let me do the same? However, the Son of Lightning frowned, and said, how did you guys escape our divine sense? This was too inconceivable. If it was one person, then so be it, but 3 people all escaped their senses, suddenly executing a killing move and killing Jia Ming cleanly and neatly. This shocked him. If they didn't get to the bottom of it, then wouldn't Ling Han be able to do it again? Su Xiuran and the others also revealed grave expressions. This kind of ability was too frightening. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, why should I tell you? The Son of Lightning humphed, but he also knew that it was impossible for Ling Han to divulge such a secret. It was just that this made him too uneasy, and he couldn't help but ask. Could it be that you've cultivated sword heart? Su Xiuran asked. Just now, I clearly used saber heart to affect you. If you hadn't cultivated sword heart, you would definitely have been swayed, and that stab would not have been accurate. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh, and said, could it not be that my stab was originally off course, but because of your influence, the stab became accurate instead? Su Xiuran sneered, his expression becoming colder and colder. He concluded that Ling Han must have cultivated sword heart, and even if he hadn't, he wasn't far from it. Otherwise, he would definitely have been affected by his saber heart. He was astonished in his heart. One had to know that he held the absolute saber every day, comprehending that ultimate elite saber intent at all times. That was why he could comprehend saber heart in his early 20s. It was the same for the small sword emperor. The sword pool was filled with swords that had been used by generations of Heaven's Sword Sex Ultimate Elites, and there were all kinds of sword intents. Ling Han definitely didn't have such resources, but he could touch sword heart at about the same age as them, and even had already grasped sword heart. This was too monstrous. The small sword emperor's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, I understand, you have a spatial divine tool on you. What? Su Xiuran and the others exclaimed at the same time. Such a divine tool was rather impressive even in the immortal realm. It could contain living things, and only a few mere ultimate elites standing at the peak of the immortal realm could refine it. Every one of them was a precious treasure, and when they appeared, corpses would be strewn everywhere. Even the 5 sects of the immortal realm didn't have such a treasure, and now it appeared on a nobody from the lower realm. Was this possible? Indeed. But the 3 of them were extremely intelligent, and immediately realized. Previously, Ling Han had directly stored away Jia Ming's corpse, and he had a spatial spirit tool on him. Everyone knew that it was impossible to store a spatial spirit tool into a spatial spirit tool, so there was only one possibility. The other party had grasped a spatial divine tool. Instantly, the 4 people's gazes shone as if they had found a stock of godly medicine, and they stared closely at Ling Han. Chapter 801. Even in the divine realm, a spatial divine tool was an extremely shocking treasure. If they could obtain it, then when they entered the divine realm in the future, they could use it to exchange for resources that would make them faint from excitement. They definitely had to obtain it. Su Xiuran and the others all revealed a fierce look. Even if it wasn't for this spatial divine tool, they definitely wouldn't let Ling Han go. Kill this brat with all your might. The 4 looked at each other, and all nodded. how to divide the spatial divine tool could be left for later. First, they had to kill Ling Han, or else everything would be for naught. Su Xiu-ran naturally drew out the absolute blade, while the Son of Lightning drew out a gigantic axe, which was several times taller than him. Wielded in his hand, it instantly emitted a terrifying, murderous aura that could scare off all heroes. Ling Han's heart involuntarily trembled. The feeling this axe gave him was actually no weaker than the absolute saber. The 5 great sects really had deep foundations. The absolute saber's own power wouldn't be weaker than 10 stars of shattering void tier, and now there was an additional axe. This was enough for Su Xiu-ran and the others to be fearless even when facing ultimate elites like Xian Yutong. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could awaken such a precious treasure in time, or else it would be useless. Otherwise, how could Jia Ming have died? 2 top-grade spirit tools were a bit troublesome. The Revere Life Sword in Ling Han's hand was glowing on its own, and multiple formation patterns were awakened. It had sensed the threat of the absolute saber and that axe. He smiled slightly, and said, "This axe is really not simple." "Naturally not simple." The Son of Lightning said proudly. "This is an imitation of the mountain and river axe." An imitation? Ling Han was truly shocked now. Such a powerful spirit tool was actually an imitation. Then how powerful would the real mountain and river axe be? Ha 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 ha, Ling Han, don't you want to establish a nation and split open the skies? The Son of Lightning laughed loudly. I might as well tell you, splitting open the skies can only be done with the mountain and river axe. Without a semi-divine tool, what treasured tool can split open this heaven and earth? Oh, I'd like to hear the details, Ling Han said with a smile. The mountain and river axe is formed from the source power of the realm and the source power of the vast lands. Why do you think it is? Su Xiu-ran said coldly. I'm telling you this because you are definitely going to die. Dong Ling, and Small Sword Emperor each held a scroll in their hands. That should be the decree of a shattering void tier elite, but if the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe could kill Ling Han, then there was no need for them to waste the decree. After all, they had another purpose for this trip. Otherwise, how could they have been bestowed with so many treasures by their elders? It should be known that the war with the Purple Moon Empire had already reached an extremely tense degree, and taking away any top-notch treasure could possibly affect the direction of the war. They were determined to obtain the true dragon's tooth. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, so there is such a treasure that is formed from the source power and realm power of a realm. Then I really want to see the real mountain and river axe. You don't have a chance. At this moment, the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe had both awakened, exuding a frightening aura. These 2 treasures were definitely the cream of the crop among level 10 spirit tools, and could even kill mid to high-level shattering void tier elites. If the demon birth sword were to face them, it wouldn't take many moves before it was forcefully broken. In the earliest battle with Su Xiu-ran, the demon birth sword had a few nicks, and if the battle continued, it was definitely not impossible for it to be broken. And if the sword was broken, the will of the martial art would also die, and it would no longer be a level 10 spirit tool, but only a level 10 refined tool. The Revere Life Sword was also automatically activated, exuding a shocking killing intent. This was the world's #1 killing sword, and it was definitely not just a boast. Unfortunately, there was only one Revere Life Sword, while the other party had awakened 2 great killing weapons. Ling Han set out the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation again, but even so, compared to Su Xiu-ran and the others, who had at least 4 shattering void tier weapons, he was still at a disadvantage. He didn't retreat, but only wanted to know how powerful the mountain and river axe was, and use it to speculate the true power of the mountain and river axe. I'll block that sword, and you're in charge of killing, Su Xiu-ran said as he brandished the absolute saber to meet the Revere Life Sword. Okay, the Son of Lightning said, brandishing the mountain and river axe as he charged over. Ding! The absolute saber and the Revere Life Sword clashed, and first emitted a crisp sound, then endless brilliant light shot out in all directions, flashing explosively in the sky, forming innumerable ripples as if about to tear the whole space apart. These two were old rivals, and being unable to suppress the other was something that had long been expected. It was at this moment that the son of lightning brandished the mountain and river axe as he charged over. This was the truly fatal one. The ice dragon met him head-on, roaring like thunder. Shua, the son of lightning, brandished the axe, and the ice dragon was actually cut into two, instantly disappearing without a trace. And in the ice dragon ground blast formation, white fog condensed, and was in the process of forming a new ice dragon. However, this required time, though it was very short. It was too terrifying. The ice dragon possessed 7 stars of battle prowess, yet it actually couldn't block the might of a single axe. This was obviously not because the son of lightning was too powerful, but because of the power of the axe itself. The son of lightning laughed loudly, withdrew the axe, and once again charged towards Ling Han with large strides. He raised the mountain and river axe high, his face filled with a piercingly cold killing intent. One strike to shatter the soul, go die. Ling Han sighed inwardly. Even if this mountain and river axe was only an imitation, its might had at least reached 10 stars of shattering void tier, or else it definitely couldn't have cut down the ice dragon so easily. Then, how terrifying would the real mountain and river axe be? 15 stars, or even 20 stars. The 5 Great Sects Foundation was truly terrifying. They didn't use all their trump cards, presumably because Ma Duobao hadn't made a move yet, and wanted to find a chance to wipe out this ancient dynasty in one fell swoop. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he dismissed the idea of using the Black Tower's power boost. After this power boost, it would naturally be easy for him to suppress Su Xiu Ran and the others, provided that they didn't have treasures like the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe in hand. However, this was obviously nonsense, so even if he used power boost, it would be useless. It was impossible to resist such treasures. I won't play with you guys anymore. Ling Han smiled faintly, and as his hands moved, he stored Hunyo, Hellion Sun Shui, the Revere Life Sword, and the Ice Dragon Ground Blast Formation into the Black Tower. Of course, he himself also hid inside. Xiu, it was as if they had never existed. Be careful. Su Xiu Ran and the others all had stern expressions. It was the same before, when Ling Han and the others suddenly charged out, causing Jia Ming to die in an incredibly stupid manner. Now, the other party was using the same trick again, but it was still as fierce. Search carefully. Since it's a spatial divine tool, then it definitely has a form. Cut everything here clean, and refine every inch of land. The 4 of them went berserk, and the Absolute Saber and Mountain and River Axe slashed madly at the ground. Normal soil and gravel would definitely turn into nothingness under such a slash, and not even ashes would be left behind. However, how could a divine tool be so easily destroyed? As long as they found it, they would immediately wrap it up with a shattering void tier law decree and bring it back to the 5 sections. Naturally, there would be great elites that could pry open the divine tool and drag out Ling Han and the others. However, to their disappointment, they couldn't find the existence of such a divine tool no matter what. Chapter 802. Oh no! Small Sword Emperor's expression suddenly changed. Jia Ming is still in Ling Han's hands. Flower of Dead Souls. Su Xiu Ran and the others exclaimed at the same time. Only with the Flower of Dead Souls can one's divine sense not be injured and enter the 4th floor. Without the Flower of Dead Souls, it's impossible to obtain the true Dragon's Tooth. The great elites clearly instructed that we must obtain the true Dragon's Tooth, and thus obtain the Flower of Dead Souls at all costs. Damn it, why does it have to be Jia Ming who has the Flower of Dead Souls? The 4 all gritted their teeth. If they couldn't complete this mission, even with their status, they'd be rolled their eyes when they returned, and might even be punished. One had to know that although they were the young rulers of this generation, how many geniuses and rulers had emerged from the 5 great sects in 10,000 years. Moreover, this was only a vast lands, and how many top-notch geniuses were there in the divine realm? To survive in the divine realm, they had to be nurtured vigorously by the sect. If they were abandoned by the sect, they'd quickly fade into the common folk in the divine realm. The divine realm was too big, and there were too many geniuses. It really didn't matter if they had or didn't. Go directly to the 4th floor and guard it. If Ling Han wants to obtain the true dragon's tooth, he'll definitely go there. They quickly reached a consensus, put away their treasures, and headed towards the depths of the 2nd floor. After they left, Ling Han and the others also appeared. Hee, it's really a stroke of luck, Jia Ming actually has such a treasure on him. Ling Han held a snow-white flower in his hand, and black fog condensed in the center of the flower, but in a moment, the white flower actually turned purple. Flower of dead souls, never thought there'd really be such a strange flower. Hellion Sun Shui exclaimed. Oh, you've heard of it? Ling Han asked. Hellion Sun Shui nodded, and said, according to legend, this is a strange flower from the netherworld. After consuming it, one's soul would feel as if it fell into the netherworld, wandering between life and death, and experiencing the wonders of life and death. And the 4th floor of the ghostly dragon cave would have a terrifying impact on one's divine sense. Anyone, even if they broke through to the shattering void tier here, wouldn't be able to withstand such an impact. The flower of dead souls can be cured, Ling Han said. It can be solved. With the flower of dead souls wrapped around the divine soul, it naturally wouldn't suffer such an impact again, Hellion Xuanxue said. Ling Han put away the flower of dead souls and said with a smile, then we're much closer to the true dragon's tooth. Hellion Xuanxue was extremely excited. She didn't even dare to think about it at first, but now that she had obtained the flower of dead souls, she truly felt the true dragon's tooth beckoning to her. After refining the true dragon's tooth, his son's bloodline would definitely rise to a terrifying level. Why was it that all the other parts of the alternative dragon had transformed into the Tao, but only one tooth was left? It was because this tooth had broken through to the god level and was a true dragon tooth. However, with those 4 people guarding the entrance to the 4th level, it might not be easy to enter. Hellion Xuanxue frowned again. The ghostly dragon cave's opening time is also limited. At that time, if we don't get expelled, we'll be locked up here for 500 years. Although we have the Black Tower, 500 years later, I'm afraid that the people outside will have already been plunged into misery and suffering, and have completely changed. 500 years later, either Ma Duo Bao would have succeeded in splitting open the skies, or the realm pill would have been refined, but Ling Han still had his parents and relatives outside, and they'd definitely become corpses in 500 years. This was an outcome he couldn't accept. At that time, we'll have to charge in no matter what, Ling Han said. He had the Revere Life Sword, and at worst, he'd use the power boost from the Black Tower to instantly explode with shattering void tier level power and speed. He didn't believe he couldn't charge out of the encirclement. Niu will help you, Hu Niu said, patting her chest. Ling Han couldn't help but smile as he stroked Hu Niu's head, and said, with Niu's help, it'll definitely work. Hee. Hu Niu was instantly immensely proud of herself. The 3 of them continued on their way. Ling Han pondered, and said, the flower of dead souls comes from the netherworld, so could it be from the netherworld? The 5 sects obviously can't enter the netherworld, so where did they get it from? His eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, the Thousand Corpse sect. The source of the Thousand Corpse sect wasn't the divine realm, but the netherworld. Then, after the 5 sects and the Thousand Corpse sect reached some kind of deal, it wouldn't be impossible for them to obtain the flower of dead souls. The depth of their cooperation has surpassed my expectations, Ling Han mumbled. After the 3 of them walked for a while, they saw that Xian Yu Kai was actually waiting ahead again. When she saw them, this girl immediately revealed an expression as if she'd expected it, and sneered, you guys can't shake me off. How troublesome. Ling Han turned to Hellion Sun Shui, and asked with a smile, "Can we kill her?" Sure, Niu wants to eat dragon stew." Hu Niu immediately drooled, giving Xian Yu Kai a fright. How could this little girl be so savage, wanting to eat dragon meat at the slightest provocation? Hellion Sun Shui shook her head, and said, "Forget it. She's the princess of the Xian Yu clan, after all, and now that we're working together, it won't be easy to give an explanation if we kill her." Only then did Xian Yu Kai breathe a sigh of relief. She obviously knew that whether it was Ling Han or Hellion Sun Shui, they both had the ability to easily kill her. However, Ling Han's next words caused her heart to leap into her throat again. "Anyways, this is the ghostly dragon cave, and even if we kill her, no one will know that we did it." Hellion Sun Shui couldn't help but shiver at Xian Yu Kai's words, and said with a smile, "All right, you don't have to scare her." Only then did Ling Han say, "Don't follow us anymore, or else we'll kill you no matter who you are." Yet Xian Yu Kai's courage was roused. She raised her head, and said, "Kill, do you dare to kill?" This was only the second level, and people came and went very quickly. She didn't believe that Ling Han would really dare to make a move. Ridiculous. Ling Han shook his head. This little princess was definitely spoiled rotten, and was extremely willful. Fortunately, it was him she met, or else she would have long since lost her life. They continued to advance. The environment of this second level was completely different. It was all a fiery red forest, and each tree was as tall as 300 meters, spreading out a huge canopy as if they were giants. These are all blood locust trees that have grown after absorbing the flesh and blood essence of a true dragon. Some of these blood locust trees can even cultivate, and can uproot the ground to walk and kill people. They are called blood locust tree men, Hellion Sun Shui reminded. Before a blood locust tree man makes a move, you won't be able to tell whether it's a tree or not, so you must be careful. Every time the ghostly dragon cave opens, the number of people who die here is the highest. Ling Han nodded. This was just like when they had ambushed Jia Ming. With a sneak attack, they could make even the strongest genius suffer grievances. However, the blood locust tree men were also treasures. They had nurtured a tree heart that condensed a sliver of the alternative dragon's essence. Its effects were about the same as the dragon's blood grass, and they were also items that had to be fought over. In front of the treasures, even if everyone knew that this place was dangerous, there were still quite a few people who chose to walk under the trees to attract the blood locust tree men to attack them, and then kill them to steal the treasures. This was what Ling Han had planned. In any case, the three of them were bold because of their skills. They only needed to be careful, and they didn't run into any blood locust tree men, and they wouldn't run into any danger. Chapter 803. Now, the truth was out. Everything could be strung together, and there was a perfect explanation. But the problem was still serious, because Ling Han had not been able to stop the process of the blood sacrifice. The Chang clan was still acting according to plan. Tomorrow, the Eternity Sky Emperor would come personally, and take the 9 demons' sword away. This was a god tool that was at least level 13. Once its might was unleashed, killing heavenly body tears would be child's play. The Eternity Sky Majestic Empire would unify the joint peace planet, and there would be no one else who could oppose them. No wonder they were so deranged and carried out such a large-scale blood sacrifice. It was because they would be invincible after obtaining the 9 demon sword, so what need was there for them to care about the criticism of others? Ling Han was slightly anxious, but there was nothing he could do. Now that the 9 Flames Heavenly King was keeping watch, if he went out, he would be courting death. There was absolutely no other possibility. My only hope is that Empress Yuan Xing still has the absolute beginning stone. This can absorb all attacks, and even a divine sword on the level of Eternal River Tier would be able to resist it. But the absolute beginning stone is only so small, and can only protect a limited number of vital points, so I would still be at a great disadvantage. What should I do? Ling Han racked his brains, but in front of absolute power, any scheme would appear pale and powerless. The Nine Flames Heavenly King only needed a single slap, and everything would be over. Time passed very quickly. The blood sacrifice was still in progress, and a large amount of life essence was being absorbed by the altar, wearing down the murderous aura of the Nine Demons' sword. By the second day, one could clearly feel that even this altar was filled with a murderous aura. This was not a bad thing. On the contrary, this was a sign that the blood sacrifice was about to succeed. That was because the murderous aura of the Nine Demons' sword had been forced out, and what would follow would be a decline from its peak. Ah! By this time, the Nine Demons' sword had also displayed a frightening might. One after another, flashes of sword light shot out from the lake of blood, easily destroying the prison on the altar. As the sword light slashed past, blood and flesh flew in all directions. The might of this sword light had reached the level of the heavenly body tier. Putting aside the prisoners whose cultivation level had been suppressed, even the guards were completely no match for it. If they were struck by it, only death awaited them. They were directly turned into pieces, and not even a complete corpse would be left behind. Yet the Nine Flames Heavenly King was not alarmed, but rather delighted. He laughed loudly, and said, as expected of an ancestral tool. "It is too powerful, too powerful. It has clearly not awakened, and there is only a sword hilt left, yet it already possesses such might. After it has been collected, its might would at least be on the level of pseudo-immortal river tier. Then, if it is completely fused with the divine sword, it would not be difficult for it to kill low-level eternal river tiers." He was too happy, and revealed a considerable number of secrets. Firstly, this god tool was not complete, but had been broken. Secondly, the Nine Demons' sword should have been broken into a considerable number of pieces, and the sword hilt was buried here. Thirdly, the Chang clan should have also grasped the whereabouts of the other god tool fragments. Which also meant that this altar was not the only one. Ling Han's heart thumped. The question now was whether the Eternity Sky Emperor had gone to collect the other pieces of the Nine Demons' sword first. Otherwise, his battle prowess could possibly have leapt into pseudo-immortal river tier by now. This was the invincible power of the joint peace planet. The sword lights intertwined more and more closely, and even the Nine Flames Heavenly King did not dare to stay here any longer. It was not that he could not resist, but that it was not worth it to do so. It would only be a waste of his power. And the sword lights were so concentrated that the whole altar was very close to being destroyed, so he did not need to think about the problem of Ling Han anymore. He was sure that if the latter was still inside the altar, he would definitely have been killed by the might of the god tool. If he was still alive after all that, that would really be too unreasonable. Long. Finally, the altar that was as tall as a mountain collapsed and fell apart, turning into a pile of rubble. However, the sword lights were still there, slashing towards the skies, and even the skies were torn apart, displaying a terrifying might. Now was the time when the Nine Demons' sword was at its most violent. Xiao, a figure broke through the air and approached from afar. He was tall, and was also wearing a long cloak, but it was crimson in color, and was fluttering in the air. Behind him, there were also 9 black orbs of light, but they were not flames, and were incredibly dark and eerie. Imperial brother. The Nine Flames Heavenly King stepped forward to greet him. The Eternity Sky Emperor, one of the 3 overlords of the joint peace planet. His whole body was entwined with the chi of primal chaos, and his features were indistinct, as if they were continuously changing, but anyone who saw him would definitely be able to recognize him the next time they met. This was a unique aura, just like Empress Yuan Xing. There were obviously not many people who had seen her true appearance, but they would definitely not confuse her with any other woman. The Eternity Sky Emperor stopped. His tall figure seemed to be able to support the heavens, and in front of him, even the heaven and earth seemed to become insignificant. His eyes swept over, and he said, "Very good, the murderous aura in the Nine Demons' sword has already been completely released. This is the ancestral tool of my Chang clan, and has an inseparable connection with the bloodline of my Chang clan. Later, I will use a secret technique to collect it, and there will be a 90% chance of success. Congratulations, Imperial brother, the Nine Flames Heavenly King said with a laugh. The sword hilt is the easiest to collect. In future, after we collect the remaining 3 fragments of the sword, we will be able to make the ancestral tool regain its supreme glory. However, Imperial brother, the Nine Demons' sword has been buried for millions and millions of years. Moreover, it is a very ominous object in the first place, and now its murderous aura has soared even higher. Even if there is a bloodline connection, Imperial brother should still not be careless. The Eternity Sky Emperor laughed loudly, and said, I naturally know. He showed an expression of pride, and said, when I have collected the Nine Demons' sword, I will sweep through the Jade Drop Empire, sweep through the chaotic stars, and take Empress Yuan Xing into my palace. Fine, after all this, it was still for the sake of Empress Yuan Xing. Though he was filled with great ambition, wanting to sweep through the 2 majestic empires and unify the joint peace planet, his last words still exposed his true nature. He was filled with desire for Empress Yuan Xing. However, even this supreme overlord was so infatuated with Empress Yuan Xing, making it his life goal to take her into his harem. It could be seen just how great the charm of this empress was. Giving birth to a son without an asshole. Ling Han cursed in his mind, but now he could only watch on helplessly. There was nothing he could do. This feeling of helplessness made him very dissatisfied. Hee, it's time for us to settle our grievances with the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. The Nine Flames Heavenly King showed a sinister killing intent. That's right. The Eternity Sky Emperor humphed, his eyes similarly seething with killing intent. Sword light filled the skies, boundless and endless. The murderous aura continued to condense and disperse, reaching its peak at this moment. In the end, it transformed into a gigantic human figure, which fixed its eyes on the Eternity Sky Emperor and the Nine Flames Heavenly King. Imperial brother, leave this guy to me. You go and collect the Nine Demons' sword, the Nine Flames Heavenly King said heroically. All right. The Eternity Sky Emperor gave a battle cry, and pressed out a palm strike towards the ruins where the sacrificial altar had been. Origin power condensed, and transformed into a gigantic palm that was as big as a mountain. With a shovel, a large amount of shattered earth was dug out. When the gigantic murderous figure saw this, it immediately smashed its fist over, bringing with it a frightening divine sense attack. Your opponent is me. The Nine Flames Heavenly King stepped forward to meet the attack. Chapter 804. According to the speculation of predecessors, this is the spine of an alternative dragon, Hellion Sun Shui said. The spine was the most important bone for both humans and demonic beasts. It was even more important than the skull. If this was a dragon's spine, then it was no wonder it could connect heaven and earth. There's no dragon's might. Ling Han pressed his hand on the sky-reaching tree. The bone patterns were bright white, undamaged even after who knew how many millennia, but there wasn't a trace of an elite's aura circulating. Otherwise, if an important part like the spine casually released a trace of aura, a normal 9th layer shattering void tier cultivator's legs would probably weaken from the pressure. Don't be careless. There's no dragon's might here, but once you reach a certain level, there will be pressure, and the higher you go, the more terrifying the pressure, Hellion Sun Shui warned. As if to explain her words, pang, a person fell from the sky, landing solidly on the ground, directly breaking into pieces. This was a member of the sea race, not of true dragon bloodline, but a genius of the willow octopus race. He didn't have a single bone in his body, and was known for being able to take a beating and having strong recovery ability, yet he lost his life here. Ah! Another person fell, but this time he didn't die, but at least half of the bones in his body were broken. Blood flowed like a pillar, and soon dyed the lower part of his body red. He struggled to climb up, forcibly condensing broken bones with origin power, taking out a few medicinal pills and eating them. He sat cross-legged, refining the medicinal effects and recovering from his injuries. This bone tree was too big. Perhaps there were people falling at every instant, but limited by their field of vision, they couldn't see them. Are you going to enter the Black Tower? Ling Han asked Hellion Sun Shui. Heng, are you looking down on me? Hellion Sun Shui said in dissatisfaction. She was the Pearl of the North Sea, and her current battle prowess might even be above Ling Han's. Ling Han raised his hand, and said with a smile, you don't appreciate my kindness. Didn't I care about you, and wanted you to slack off? No need. Hellion Sun Shui immediately began to climb the bone tree. Her speed was very fast, and she instantly rushed up over 300 meters. However, her speed soon slowed down. Hunyo, let's go too. Hunyo nodded crisply, and climbed up together with Ling Han. Sure enough, after ascending 1,000 feet, there was a faint pressure coming from the bone tree. Because no one could fly here, they could only climb up the tree. They had to hold on tightly to the tree trunk and resist the pressure at all times. In the face of this level of pressure, Ling Han and Hunyo naturally did not take it seriously in the slightest. They both turned into the light of lightning, and quickly climbed up the tree trunk, as fast as lightning. Hellion Xuanxue wasn't slow either. Not only had she learned the thunderclap ninth heaven, she herself was also a super genius, and her aptitude was not the slightest bit inferior to Su Xiu, Ran and the others. After more than an hour, they overtook many people along the way. Some of them were fine, minding their own business as they climbed up, but others actually wanted to attack Ling Han and the others. That Ling Han obviously wouldn't be polite, and attacked without mercy, shaking these people who couldn't control their hands off the tree. Whether they lived or died depended on their fate. The speed of Ling Han and the others also became slower and slower. They had now climbed over 2/3 of the height, and the dragons might also became stronger and stronger, making Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui sweat. Only Hunyo acted as if nothing had happened. One moment, she would fly very high, and the next moment, she would climb down again, urging Ling Han to hurry up. Ling Han thought that if an ambush was carried out at the entrance of the 3rd floor, the effect would be great, and the probability of falling for it would be over 90%. However, this spine was too big, and who knew where the target would come from? Thus, if they wanted to set up an ambush, they would need at least a few thousand people to form a circle above. Moreover, everyone had to have peak stage heaven tier battle prowess, or else they still wouldn't be able to do anything to Ling Han. However, Hunyo wasn't affected by the dragon's might in the slightest. With this scout, who could ambush Ling Han? Their speed became slower and slower, but after another 2 hours, the three still climbed to the top of the bone tree and entered the 3rd floor of the ghostly dragon cave. The environment here was different again. The surroundings were all bare mountain rocks, but every mountain rock was crimson red. Looking from afar, it looked like a land of blood, and also like a burning sea of fire. Crimson red was the main color of this place, and there was no other color apart from that. Dragon's blood grass also grows in the cracks of the rocks, Hellion Sun Shui said. Hellion Xuanxue said. Even though they had already harvested over 100 stalks and a large amount of blood locust tree hearts, there was no such thing as having too many of such treasures. Ling Han nodded. The three searched as they advanced, but didn't waste time on the road. After all, the main point of this trip was the true dragon's tooth, which was the most valuable treasure. They didn't want to waste too much time here. If the ghostly dragon cave closed and they were all expelled, then it would be a matter of 500 years later if they entered again. Their luck wasn't bad, and they had many harvests along the way. This was obviously because Ling Han had activated the Eye of Truth and could see everything clearly, greatly increasing their harvests. However, this definitely affected their speed, but every time the ghostly dragon cave opened, it was at least half a month's time, and they only used 5 days until now, so there were still about 10 days left. There's a big guy in front. Ling Han withdrew his gaze and even rubbed his eyes. These few days, he had been using the Eye of Truth, which made his eyes feel a bit sore and quite uncomfortable. Could it be the demonic ape? Helian Xuanxue muttered to herself. Seeing Ling Han's puzzled expression, she explained, the monsters on the third floor are mainly ape-like creatures, but according to speculation, this could be the fleas on the alternative dragons that have absorbed dragon blood and transformed. Ling Han couldn't help but have a strange expression, and said, such a powerful existence as the alternative dragons also have fleas? Of course not when they were in their prime, but in their later years, their vital energy and blood deteriorate, and they might not even be able to move a finger, so it's very normal for them to have fleas, Helian Xuanxue said. The life of the dragon race was long. Even in their later years, they still had one last breath left, and it might take 8 to 10 years before they truly died. In that case, it didn't seem strange for them to have some parasites. Just like the bloodworm on the first floor, its vital energy and blood deteriorated in its later years, and a strange change occurred. The fleas can actually grow over 30 meters tall after absorbing dragon blood, that's quite rare. Ling Han smiled. However, this big flea is sitting there motionless, as if guarding some treasure. Maybe there's another stalk of dragon blood grass. Come, let's go. They moved forward, and after a while, they indeed saw a huge crimson monster squatting in front of them. It was shaped like an ape, but it had 6 legs, and indeed looked more like a flea. And under this monster's body was a huge blood-colored stone, which had a much deeper luster than the other stones. Helian Xuanxue was slightly excited, and said, could it be the true dragon bloodstone? Chapter 805. True dragon bloodstone was formed by watering the alternative dragon's blood essence, so a fist-sized bloodstone was comparable to a 3-leaf dragon's blood grass, and such a large piece in front of them was simply astonishing. Thus, Ling Han and Helian Xuanxue both gasped, feeling an unbelievable sense of surprise. However, this large flea was at the shattering void tier, and lying there from afar emitted a terrifying sense of oppression, making Ling Han's and Helian Xuanxue's skin almost shatter when they got slightly closer. One had to know that their physiques were all at the level of 9th tier rare metal, yet they couldn't even get close, which showed how powerful this large flea was. Shattering void tier 10 stars, 12 stars, or even 13 stars of battle prowess. Ling Han had a feeling that this flea almost reached the height of a 15-eyed corpse king, comparable to the giant silver spider in the Fire Country's ancient mining area. Even if he unleashed Ice Dragon Ground Blast Formation, it would be useless, and he would be insta-killed if he went up. What to do? The treasure was right in front of him, but he could only watch helplessly. Let's go, let's go. Hunyo pulled Ling Han's hand and was about to walk forward. She was really a newborn calf, completely not knowing what fear was. Ling Han pressed her down, and said, no, the aura in front is too powerful. We can't bear it, and will directly explode and die. Originally, he could still use Ice Dragon Ground Blast Formation to pull the aggro, but this big guy was really too powerful, and killing the Ice Dragon and turning back would only be a matter of an instant. But Nyo isn't afraid. Hunyo said energetically. The little girl was extraordinarily talented, fearless of pressure, and even poison, fire, and ice were ineffective against her. Previously, she even broke through the path of Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire's 5 senses blockade. But the problem was, she didn't have the Black Tower, so how could she collect such a large piece of bloodstone? Moreover, the Black Tower was as small as a mustard seed, and couldn't be carried by Hunyo. Otherwise, she could sneak closer quietly, and then Ling Han would suddenly appear, directly collecting the true dragon bloodstone, and then hide inside. That was a way. Nyo will lure it away, Hunyo volunteered. Ling Han shook his head. No, that's at least comparable to a 15-eyed corpse king, it's probably the strongest existence in this ghostly dragon cave, that's why it's guarding such a large piece of true dragon bloodstone, you can't outrun it. Don't, little Nyo. Hunyo was unconvinced. She put her hands on her hips, and said, Nyo's speed is the fastest. Her body turned into lightning, and in an instant, she appeared extremely far away. With another flash, she appeared even further away this time. Ling Han and Helian Xuanxue simultaneously revealed expressions of shock. Such a high speed was something that they could only watch in the dust. The corners of their mouths couldn't help but twitch. Everyone had learned the thunderclap ninth heaven, but why was there such a big difference in speed? Niu is a genius. Hu Niu had already returned in a flash, feeling proud of herself. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Your speed is really comparable to the shattering void tear, and even a bit faster." "Then Niu will go." Hu Niu was not the slightest bit afraid of that Flea King. Ling Han pondered for a moment, then said, "Later, after you circle around that big guy, we'll rendezvous about 50 kilometers ahead of here." "Okay." Hu Niu agreed crisply, and with a xiu, she shot out, stopping in front of the Flea King, and said loudly, "Stinky guy, come catch Niu." The Flea King only glanced casually, and then withdrew its gaze, as if it was sleeping soundly, too lazy to pay attention to this ant. Hu Niu was furious, actually daring to ignore such a cute her. She picked up a crimson stone, completely covering her small body. She roared loudly, and the stone immediately twined with lightning. Xiu, this stone shot rapidly at the Flea King like a cannonball. Pa! Without waiting for the stone to hit, the Flea King's terrifying aura caused the stone to explode into pieces. Reaching such a height, even a wisp of aura could shatter stars. However, this big guy was finally angered, and couldn't help but raise its body, glaring at Hu Niu. However, it immediately gloomily discovered that this ant just happened to be at a distance where its attack was weakened, and couldn't be killed even if it blasted an attack. It was extremely lazy, and immediately lay down to sleep. Anyways, it was just an ant, too lazy to pay attention to it. Xiu, 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 Hu Niu consecutively threw another barrage of stones. Don't say that the Flea King's aura could shatter stones, there was still the power of lightning produced by the thunderclap ninth heaven, and even the Flea King felt its body slightly numb. This was far from being able to harm it, but it made it very, very displeased. Finally, after Hu Niu smashed it a dozen more times, this Flea King was enraged. "This king doesn't show its might, and you really think you can move a tiger on a flea's head?" It roared, and the sound waves turned into circles of ripples that spread in all directions. Pa, 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 the surrounding stones were all shattered into pieces, extremely terrifying. "Ha ha ha ha, want to hurt Niu, big stinky bug, you're still far from it." Hu Niu made a face, and immediately leaped away. The Flea King finally got up, and chased after Hu Niu. Ling Han immediately wanted to charge towards that true dragon bloodstone, but once he moved, he discovered that this Flea King had been here for an unknown amount of time, and the shattering void tear's aura was almost tangible. With his movement, he immediately felt like the air was like a blade, forcibly tearing open his skin. Ling Han. Helian Sun Shui hurriedly pulled him back. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "You enter into the Black Tower, I'll be fine alone." But Helian Sun Shui obviously wasn't at ease. "It's time to feed your son, you flat-chested." Ling Han grabbed Helian Sun Shui and stuffed her into the Black Tower. He unleashed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, which obviously couldn't fight against the Flea King, but it shouldn't be a problem to just fight against the aura left behind by the Flea King. Everyone was in the shattering void tier, and although there was a gap, it wouldn't be that huge. The ice dragon appeared, hovering above Ling Han. He drove the formation forward, but immediately discovered that this formation had no effect on dispelling the shattering void tier's pressure. Ling Han could only put away the formation's eye and walk forward alone. Pa, 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 blood immediately sprayed from his skin, and his blood vessels also ruptured under such pressure. He hurriedly circulated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and with the support of the ancient mystical art, the situation instantly became much better. However, he still had to continue walking forward, and the pressure of the aura ahead was even more terrifying. After walking for a while, his bones were clanging as if they were about to break. This was a pretty good test, Ling Han said inwardly. He was most proficient in turning hardships into opportunities, and under such great pressure, he only lacked a sliver of sword heart, which might be able to break out of the cocoon. Sword heart was at the shattering void tears level, and as long as he could cultivate sword heart, it would be easy to resist the shattering void tears aura. He resolutely advanced step by step, his whole body spurting blood, but his eyes became brighter and brighter, as if something was about to be nurtured within his body. Chapter 806. In the battle between Ling Han and Xianyu Ziyuan, in the end, Xianyu Ziyuan's martial art intent entered his body, and it took him a whole month to wear it down. This allowed him to touch the edge of sword heart, but this step could be crossed in a few days. It could take a few years, a few decades, a few centuries, or even a lifetime, and it was impossible to accomplish. The comprehension of Tao was this mysterious. As the saying goes, one who travels 100 miles is only halfway. Before success, it was no different from walking on the spot. Now, the Flea King's aura was even more terrifying. It was at the level of a 15-eyed corpse king, and in a head-on confrontation, it could kill Ling Han a few hundred times with a single breath, but now it was only against the shattering void tears aura, so it was obviously different. This was a contest at the level of martial art. Although Ling Han's tier was much lower, he was about to cultivate sword heart, which was where his confidence lay. Break the cocoon and become a butterfly, come out, sword heart. Ling Han said in his mind, but it was always that little bit off, making him mad. Pooh. He was also spitting out blood. Under the shattering void tears aura's suppression, even if it was him, he was still heavily injured. In the outside world, which shattering void tear elite didn't deliberately retract their aura? If it was released without restraint, then apart from shattering void tear elites, everyone else would be annihilated. Even heaven tier elites couldn't withstand such an aura at close range for a long time. Pa, Ling Han's bones all shattered, and his whole body twisted and deformed under the aura's pressure. Now, he was 10 meters long, but his body was thin and thin, extremely strange. About to die, realization flashed in Ling Han's mind, and he hurriedly dissolved a drop of indestructible true fluid. Instantly, his body recovered, and even the shattering void tears aura couldn't stop it. However, good times didn't last long. After this drop of indestructible true fluid's essence was completely dissolved, his body began to be damaged again. Why didn't he comprehend sword heart yet? Ling Han was suddenly shocked. He had been too impatient. How could martial arts be achieved by being impatient? Haste makes waste, and he had gone astray. It was no wonder, under the shattering void tears aura's pressure, who wouldn't be anxious? He relaxed his mind and no longer deliberately pursued the sword heart. Instead, he focused on resisting the pressure. Pa. There were still many wounds on his body, making him look like he had killed 1,000 people and become a demon bathed in blood. Step by step, Ling Han's footsteps were firm. Blood was flowing, and sweat was also flowing. His eyes shone brightly, and a sense of pride arose in his heart. So what if he didn't cultivate sword heart? He could rely on himself to resist the aura of the shattering void tear. At worst, he would be covered in scars, but what was a little injury to a martial artist? He strode forward, getting closer and closer to the true dragon bloodstone. Finally, he touched it. Joy rose in his heart, and at this moment, he felt as if some kind of shackle had been broken in his body. An indescribable feeling surged in his heart, and countless sword intents surged in his mind. Kenshin was stunned for a moment before he reacted. When he took the final step, his spirit also completed a transformation, and he actually took a step into the heart of the sword. A kind of understanding rose in him. Some principles couldn't be deliberately pursued. Tao followed nature, and only by doing so would it conform to Tao. As he thought in his heart, his movements weren't slow. He stretched out a hand and pressed it onto the true dragon blood organ. Though it was ridiculously large, after cultivating sword heart, it was as if his spirit had been reborn, becoming incredibly tough. Like a fish net, it spread out and wrapped around the true dragon blood Oregon. With another pull, it had already entered into the Black Tower. Done. He turned around, and began to leave this place where the aura was suppressed. At this time, he no longer felt strained. With the protection of the sword heart, his spirit was stable, and even the shattering void tear aura's damage to him was pitifully small. He was still injured because he had just cultivated sword heart, and couldn't even be considered to have reached small accomplishment, let alone sword heart illumination. After a while, he finally walked out of this area. Body of diamond activated, and the broken bones and torn skin on his body instantly healed. He took out another set of clothes from the Black Tower and changed into them. He didn't look like he had been injured at all. Hee, hand over the true dragon bloodstone, and I can spare your life. But at this moment, 5 young men and women walked out from behind the crimson stones, all of them looking at him with murderous gazes. He actually didn't discover them. Ling Han was startled, and couldn't help but reflect. On the way back, he kept trying to figure out the wonders of sword heart, and neglected his surroundings. And this place indeed had a great restriction on divine sense, which was why he didn't discover the existence of the 5 people. If they were like Su Xiu Ran, and suddenly attacked him, he would probably be flustered, right? Careless, negligent. In the future, no matter what, he had to maintain vigilance. Otherwise, as long as he didn't reach the pinnacle of martial art, he could possibly die because of some small details. Seeing that Ling Han actually dared to ignore them, the 5 people were all enraged. A man dressed in an embroidered robe shouted, "Human, I'm talking to you." Ling Han collected his thoughts, and said flatly, "I'm the one who obtained the true dragon bloodstone, why should I give it to you? If you want it, go look for it yourself. I'm in a pretty good mood right now, it's best if you don't ruin it." Ha 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 ha. The young man in the embroidered robe laughed loudly. How laughable. A mere human dares to be so presumptuous. Do you know who we are? Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Of course I do." The 5 of them couldn't help but feel smug. Even a human knew of their prowess. How awesome was that? However, Ling Han's following words caused their faces to twitch, and they revealed expressions of fury. Because Ling Han pointed at them, and said one by one, "You're a cat, you're a dog, you're a cow, you're a pig, and you're a sheep." The young man in the embroidered robe couldn't help but shout, "I'm Mo Yuanming, the genius of the West Sea's Mo royal family." "Oh, so you're Mo Yuanming." "I know, a dog." Ling Han nodded, and looked like he was very receptive. A purple-robed man snorted coldly and said, "Don't waste your breath on him. Kill him and seize the true dragon bloodstone." "Yes, brother Zhengxin Wang." The other 4 all obeyed. Although they were all well-known figures of the Mo family's younger generation, none of them could compare to Mo Zhengxin. This was a super genius that would only appear once in thousands or even tens of thousands of years. His ancestral blood was pure, and he was one of the 3 great young kings of the North Sea. It was extremely likely that he would advance into the shattering void tier before the age of 50. Mo Yuanming and the other 3 surrounded them, but Mo Zhengxin just stood with his hands behind his back, disdaining to make a move. The sea race was very proud. Even when they were dealing with a single human, the 4 of them still had to work together. This was already too much. After all, the aura that Ling Han gave off was only at the deity transformation tier, while one of the 4 was at the lower stage of the heaven tier. Last chance. Hand over the true dragon bloodstone, or else die. Chapter 807. Zhao Luan was truly shameless. Even as he suppressed Ling Han, he didn't forget to flatter himself. He claimed the credit of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire's retreat. In reality, almost no one knew that Empress Luan Xing had personally intervened. Thus, the Golden Lion Nation, or perhaps the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, suddenly retreating could only be attributed to the fact that their secret had been leaked. they didn't dare to continue fighting. Otherwise, an all-out war between the two majestic empires would only benefit the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. In this way, Zhao Luan had truly made a great contribution. After all, the entire assault team had been annihilated, and only he had managed to escape. Moreover, he had also exposed the fact that there were elites from the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire in the Golden Lion Nation. At first, it had been a magnificent failure. It was a rash action of launching a surprise attack without knowing the depth and background of the enemy. However, in Zhao Luan's mouth, it had become a great contribution. This person's shamelessness was indeed impressive. Ling Han, do you have anything to say? Nan Men Yang asked Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, just as Zhao Luan said, I am only in the medium extreme, and no one took me seriously. Then, wasn't it very normal for me to escape? Furthermore, I would like to ask Zhao something. You clearly knew that I was only in the medium extreme, so why did you choose me to join the assault team? This. Zhao Luan was startled. He hadn't thought that Ling Han would ask such a question in public. Could he say that he wanted to avenge a personal grudge, and borrow the enemy's power to eliminate him? If he said that, he could forget about having a good ending. Putting aside the fact that he would be punished by the Empire, which soldier would still dare to follow him in the future? Wouldn't they be afraid that they would be tricked by him one day? Ling Han, don't try to change the topic. Zhao Luan said hurriedly. How could he allow Ling Han to lead the way? This was a trial of whether he had defected to the enemy, so why did he have to drag him into this? And, don't even think about changing the topic, Gu Tianchu said with a nod. He was naturally siding with Zhao Luan. Ling Han, don't try to talk so eloquently. There are a great many witnesses here that can prove that you were indeed captured that day, so don't deny it no matter what, Kong Chenghe said coldly. Oh, then I really want to hear how I was captured, Ling Han said with a smile. Summon the witnesses. Kong Chenghe looked displeased. This brat really wouldn't shed a tear until he saw his own coffin. One after another, young people walked into the public trial venue. They were precisely the disciples of the academy who had joined the assault team at the beginning, and had been captured later on. Thankfully, Empress Luan Xing had acted quickly. Otherwise, they would probably still be locked up in a cage at this moment. Zhao Luan's eyes swept over them, and he couldn't help but look slightly surprised. That was because he had only found a dozen or so witnesses, but now there were almost 30. What the hell were these extra few people? I am Ning Ziming. I am Ming Luren. I am Bo Xing, I am. These people reported their names one by one. However, some people only had to think about their family background to realize that their elders were either the subordinates of Great General Sha, or they were the direct descendants of Great General Zhao. Zhao Luan instantly understood. So it turned out that Sha Yuan was in the same trench as him in this matter. He really had not expected this. However, with the sons of two great generals working together, it would really be strange if they could not kill a mere outsider brat. I saw it with my own eyes. Ling Han was captured together with us, and I was even locked in the same cell as him. It was only half a day, and Ling Han was brought to trial, and then he never returned. If he had not betrayed us, how could he have possibly escaped from the hands of the enemy and returned to the camp? Thankfully, Zhao brought back the information, and forced the Golden Lion Nation and the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire to retreat. Otherwise, with a traitor like Ling Han acting as a spy, who knows how much damage the Empire would have suffered. These people were all lying through their teeth. As the saying went, a crowd's words could melt gold. With so many people testifying against Ling Han, who should the masses who did not know the truth believe? Of course, it was the side that believed in more people. Traitor. In the crowd, it was unknown who was the first to call out. Traitor. Even more people began to call out, and it suddenly formed an overwhelming momentum. Even if Li Weiwei, Ji Yun, and the others believed in Ling Han, their voices of objection instantly disappeared under these furious shouts. Shui Yenyu's fists were clenched tightly. As long as Ling Han entered into the Black Tower once, it would prove that he could not possibly be captured by the enemy. However, if the secret that he possessed a spatial god tool was exposed, who knew how many people would make a move against him? Though he was freakishly talented now, his level was still too low, after all. The left minister, the 7 generals, and the other elites could not possibly notice him, but once the secret that he possessed a spatial god tool was exposed, perhaps even the empress would be moved. This was a dilemma. Either he would be labeled as a traitor, or he would be targeted by numerous elites. Either choice was extremely terrible. Why had the empress not come to help him? Could it be that in her imperial majesty's eyes, such a small matter was not worthy of her attention at all? Ling Han, what else do you have to say? Kong Chenghe asked menacingly. I have nothing to say. Ling Han shook his head. Then you have admitted your guilt, Gu Tianchu continued. Ling Han shook his head as he said, I really have nothing to say to this bunch of idiots. They are all lying through their teeth, and there is no room for communication at all. You, traitor, you still dare to quibble. You have committed such a treasonous act, and you still dare to be so arrogant. These witnesses were all filled with righteous indignation. They had actually been called idiots in public. Ling Han calmly said, whatever man does, the heavens follow. Ask your hearts of martial arts. Can you feel at ease doing this? These words were shouted out by him with the 7-kill subduing soul technique. It only reached the depths of their souls, though it no longer possessed any destructive power. Suddenly, the faces of these witnesses all paled. Their hearts were being interrogated, and even their souls were trembling. Ling Han, you still dare to threaten the witnesses? Zhao Luan asked menacingly. Hung, a red sun rose up behind him, and the aura of the sun-moon tear spread out without reservation, pressing down on Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but falter. He could even be unafraid of the aura of the eternal river tear, but aura and aura were two different things. And now, this aura was real pressure. The suppression of a whole major tier was a gap that no prodigy could possibly make up for. Ling Han immediately broke out in sweat. Ka, ka, ka. His godly bones crackled, and his face instantly flushed red. Zhao, are you trying to extort a confession? He asked coldly, unyielding in the slightest. In front of so many witnesses, you still dare to quibble. Against a person like you, so what if I extort a confession? Zhao Luan smirked coldly. Zhao Luan, you've gone too far. Li Weiwei couldn't help but stand up. Fourth young miss, I've offended you. Xiang Qingyun immediately moved. With a wave of his palm, Li Weiwei was instantly rendered speechless. This was the complete suppression of the consummate level over an elite in the low extreme. The Lord Left Minister had ordered for Li Weiwei to maintain her distance from Ling Han as much as possible. To Xiang Qingyun, this was really good news. Thus, he was very happy to be this kind of villain. In any case, he also knew that Li Weiwei would definitely not lay her hands on him. If he was hated by her, then so be it. As long as he could cling on to the Lord Left Minister's leg, it would be fine. Ling Han, it has already come to this. If you are still not willing to confess, then you can only wait upon me with great torture, Nan Men Yang said darkly. Chapter 808. Even Mo Zhengxin's expression changed. He discovered that his opponent's hand was as hard as metal, and the dragon claw was not damaged or injured. This was too terrifying. However, as a human, are you sure you want to fight the sea race, especially the sea race's king in close combat? It should be known that the strength of the human race was their understanding of martial art. Pulling apart the distance to compete with techniques and skills was the way of the king, but close combat belonged to the domain of body cultivators. Unfortunately, the sea race's king, because of the dragon's blood, were all body cultivators, and their physiques were incomparably tyrannical. In close combat, you don't have brute physical strength. How long do you need to send out a palm strike? This amount of time is enough for me to send out 10 or even 100 attacks, blasting you into pieces. Mo Zhengxin snorted coldly, and his other hand also grabbed towards Ling Han. This strike was fast, ruthless, and accurate. At such a short distance, how could Ling Han block it? If there was a distance, then he only needed to raise his hand and spit out his origin energy. It didn't matter if the speed was a bit slow. Moving my arm is always faster than your attack across such a long distance. But now, you've just raised your hand, and my dragon claw has already slashed your neck. There was a cruel smile on Mo Zhengxin's lips. With this strike, a talented human was going to die, which made him feel very satisfied. There was no pleasure in killing ordinary people. Killing 1,000 or 10,000 people was as satisfying as killing a genius. Pa! But he was shocked to find that Ling Han had stretched out his right hand and grabbed his dragon claw again. How was this possible? Previously, he accelerated towards Ling Han, so although Ling Han moved back, there was a bit of time to buffer, so it was understandable that he grabbed his hand. But now? Could it be that this human also had amazing physical strength? Otherwise, how could he have such a fast reaction? Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "At first, I still had some appreciation for your talent, and in the future, you could lend a hand in times of great calamity, but since you insist on seeking death, I can only fulfill your wish." "Humph, I admit that I underestimated you, but if you want to kill me, dream on." Mo Zhengxin sneered and suddenly kicked at Ling Han. Ling Han raised his leg to meet the attack. Peng, 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 peng. The two of them continuously kicked each other. Because both of their arms were grabbing each other, it was impossible for their kicks to go past each other. They collided with each other firmly. The sea race had an advantage in terms of physique. Mo Zhengxin's physique was comparable to 9th-tier rare metal, and Ling Han wasn't weak either, having also reached this level. In theory, the two of them should be tied. However, a draw didn't mean that neither of them was injured. On the contrary, they suffered a huge impact every time they collided. Their legs were deformed from the impact. It was like a peerless treasured sword that was invincible, but if two such treasured swords collided with each other, both would be damaged or even broken. It was like this now. Both of their legs were bent, and the degree of distortion was a bit scary. However, they were still continuously kicking at each other. This was a battle of breath, and if one couldn't persevere, then it wouldn't be the leg that would be kicked, but a vital point like the lower abdomen. If the dantian was kicked, then wouldn't one become a cripple? Mo Zhengxin secretly regretted. At this point, there was no chance to use any spirit tools or decrees. Both of their arms were grabbing each other, and they couldn't even take out any spirit tools or decrees. However, he was a descendant of the Mo clan, and he had several powerful treasured tools on him. Each one of them was enough to kill Ling Han, but now he couldn't use any of them, so how could he not feel regret? However, who asked him to bully Ling Han as a human? He wanted to fight the other in close combat and defeat the other in one move, but he didn't expect to encounter a strong opponent. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, "Regret it? Ha, why would I regret it? Do you think your situation is better than mine?" Mo Zhengxin wasn't willing to show weakness. "Indeed better than you." Ling Han operated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his bent thigh immediately returned to normal. "What?" Mo Zhengxin turned pale with fright. "What kind of fucking recovery power is this? Are you really a human? Are you sure you're not a monster? So what now?" Ling Han kicked him again. "Ah!" Mo Zhengxin instantly screamed. Although the power of this kick didn't increase, he felt that he was heavily injured from the impact. This was a psychological effect. He had been severely wounded, yet Ling Han had completely recovered. With such a contrast, he naturally felt a little like he was on the verge of collapse. Moreover, he felt a strong sense of frustration. As a descendant of the true dragon, he had actually lost to a human in terms of physique. Ling Han was merciless, and his kick became even more urgent. Peng, 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 peng. Once Mo Zhengxin's fighting spirit was shaken, he obviously couldn't catch up, and was instantly kicked wildly by Ling Han. Peng, he could no longer hold on to Ling Han, and was kicked away. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, and his lower abdomen had sunk in, appearing very ghastly. Mo Zhengxin struggled to get up. He panted heavily, slightly calming his good mood, and took out a scroll. Shattering Void Tear Decree. You're very strong, but so what? He sneered. In front of the Shattering Void Tear's battle prowess, you're just a mere ant, die for me. He suddenly opened the decree, and endless pressure spread out, making Mo Yuanming and the others involuntarily kneel down, their skin and flesh lacerated. This was as if a Shattering Void Tear elite had arrived in person, and it wasn't as simple as imposing manner. Even if it was a king of martial arts, so what? It was as if their bodies were about to collapse. Ling Han smiled faintly, waved his right hand, and scattered out 108 short swords, forming the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Instantly, an ice dragon formed and roared at the sky. Go! Ling Han stretched out his hand and pointed, and the ice dragon charged towards Mo Zhengxin. The decree just opened, and a burly man walked out, emitting the powerful aura of the Shattering Void Tear. When he discovered the ice dragon attacking, he immediately went up to meet it. Peng, 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 the two sides fought, and the Shattering Void Tear's battle prowess instantly shattered all the surrounding mountain rocks. If this wasn't the ghostly dragon cave, the stars in the world would definitely be unlucky again, and who knew how many would collapse. That man was suppressed. What? Mo Zhengxin and the others all revealed expressions of disbelief. This was their biggest trump card, and in this ghostly dragon cave where Shattering Void Tear elites couldn't enter, Shattering Void Tear's decree wasn't awesome enough. But now, he had been completely suppressed by the other side. Ling Han, however, understood in his heart that how strong could the power sealed in the decree be. It was restricted by the double restrictions of the maker and the materials of the decree itself. Being able to reach the battle prowess of Shattering Void Tear 5 stars was already very impressive. In the Shattering Void Tear, 1 star was a world apart, not to mention the difference of 2 stars or even more. As the ice dragon roared, it tore the decree into pieces. No! Mo Zhengxin screamed, but was strangled to death by the ice dragon without any suspense. Ling Han's killing intent soared, and just as he was about to kill Mo Yuanming and the others, his expression changed in shock. He saw that the Flea King was flying over from afar, and with a spring of its 6 legs, its speed was astonishingly fast. Once this big guy saw that the true dragon bloodstone had disappeared, it would definitely fly into a rage and quickly retreat. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to deal with Mo Yuanming and the others anymore. Anyway, he didn't take them seriously. He soared up, and instantly disappeared into the distance. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 809. Ling Han rushed to the agreed place with Hun Yo, and saw that the little girl had arrived long ago, sitting on a rock and swinging her legs in boredom. Her small mouth was pouting, appearing very unhappy. After discovering Ling Han, she snorted, and said, "Ling Han, you're too slow, making Yo wait, sorry." Ling Han hurriedly said with a smile, "Nyo helped a lot this time." Hun Yo instantly turned from annoyance to joy, clapping her hands, and said, "Nyo is the best. Nyo is indeed the best." Ling Han rubbed Hun Yo's head, this little girl was really too special. Harvest first. Ling Han and Hun Yo entered the Black Tower together, calling Helian Sun Shui over. She was carrying Ling Jian Shui, and together they arrived before the huge true dragon bloodstone. Ya. Ling Jianshui waved his small hands and feet, trying to break free from Helian Sun Shui's embrace. Huh? Ling Han was startled. Little guy can feel the power of the true dragon bloodstone. He paused, and said, Sun Shui, let him go. There naturally wouldn't be any problems inside the Black Tower. Helian Sun Shui put her son on the ground as told, and the little guy immediately used his hands and feet to run towards the true dragon bloodstone. Although he wasn't a year old yet, his brute strength was extremely shocking, and his speed was astonishing. Very soon, he ran in front of the true dragon bloodstone, climbing up step by step. After reaching the top, he comfortably lay on top, just like the Flea King from before. Ling Han immediately noticed that there were dragon patterns flashing on the little guy's body, emitting a faint radiance and emitting dragon's might, which was still continuously strengthening. Absorbing the blood of a true dragon, continuously becoming stronger. For a true dragon's descendant, the blood of a true dragon was definitely a rare treasure, perhaps even irreplaceable. Ling Han walked over, and placed his hand on the true dragon bloodstone. Immediately, the 9 dragons' tyrant body art automatically circulated, extracting the essence within the bloodstone to strengthen his body, causing his physique to become slightly stronger, and his power to increase greatly. He had an urge to absorb all the energy in the bloodstone so that his brute force could reach the heaven tier, or even stronger. He hurriedly restrained himself. It wasn't a good thing to increase his power too quickly. He needed to have the mental state to control this power. However, he had only been in the heaven tier in his previous life, and his battle prowess could not be considered powerful at all. In fact, it could not even compare to his current state of mind. He no longer had the advantage of mental state. It could be said that aside from the old path of advancing into the heaven tier, he had already surpassed his previous life in all aspects, and it had only been a little more than 5 years. Thinking about it made him feel like he was dreaming. After reaching the peak of the deity transformation realm, he needed to properly consolidate his cultivation before breaking through. He could not leave behind any regrets, or else it might have a great impact. Ling Han retracted his hand and said, Small tower, will there be a problem if this brat absorbs the true dragon's blood like this? Small tower appeared, and calmly said, His physique is not bad, much stronger than yours. You'd better die quickly. That way, your son will inherit the Black Tower and will definitely be more outstanding than you. Damn, the corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. You praised my son, but you don't have to belittle me like this, right? This Tsundere Tower, one day, I'll make it kneel down and sing subjugation. However, it was fine as long as there was no problem. This brat would just lie there and continuously absorb the true dragon's blood. He really didn't know what heights his brute force could reach when he activated his spirit base. Flower Blossom Tier. Spiritual Infant Tier, Ling Han and the others exited the Black Tower. The most precious treasure was obviously the true dragon's tooth. In comparison, the others were sesame seeds. Even this piece of true dragon's bloodstone could only be considered a slightly larger sesame seed. Ong! Just as they exited the Black Tower, they heard a terrifying roar reverberate, shaking their skin to ripple like water. It was that Flea King. When it returned and found that the true dragon's bloodstone was gone, it obviously went mad, roaring as if it wanted nothing more than to destroy this world. Let's go. Ling Han and the others hurriedly left. Forcefully fighting the 15-eyed corpse king-level Flea King was practically seeking death. That was something only an idiot would do. After running for over 100 miles, although the roar still resounded, the ripples in the air finally couldn't affect them anymore. This was the Shattering Void Tier, able to injure a Heaven Tier level elite with a single roar. After walking for another few hundred miles, the roar finally disappeared completely, allowing the three to breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this big guy didn't pursue everywhere, or else if it targeted them, could they block the Revere Life Sword's awakening? They didn't deliberately search for true dragon's bloodstone or dragon's blood grass or other spirit medicine treasures. Now, they stared at the true dragon's tooth. After all, they didn't know how much time they would spend on the 4th level. After another 2 days, they arrived at the end of the 3rd level. There was no passageway or tall mountain formed by bones here, only a seemingly ordinary door that connected to a completely different world. On the other side was an ocean of flames. Hee hee, I've finally waited for you. With a sneer, Su Xiu ran and the others appeared one after another, blocking the passageway at the entrance. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, I've made you guys wait for a long time, truly sorry, no matter, just use your life as compensation, the small sword emperor said coldly. Then I'm even more sorry. I value my life very much, and don't have the slightest intention of handing it over to anyone. Ling Han looked at the 4 people, his gaze cold. In a battle with his own strength, he wasn't afraid of these 4 people. Even if his battle prowess was inferior, with his physique, he could recover endlessly, and become the one who had the last laugh. However, everyone possessed battle prowess that surpassed their tier. What absolute saber, mountain and river axe? Perhaps he'd have to bring the Flea King from before to be able to match them. He immediately made a decision to directly charge over and get the true dragon's tooth first. As for these 4 people, he could deal with them later. Die! Su Xiu ran immediately unleashed the absolute saber, and the Son of Lightning also drew out the mountain and river axe, raising it high in his hand. This treasured tool had already awakened, exuding a peerlessly domineering aura. Ling Han drew Helian Sun Shui and Hun Yo into the Black Tower. Anyways, the 4 of them already knew that he had a spatial divine tool, so it didn't matter if he used it in front of them. Want to charge through by force? You're too naive, the small sword emperor said with a sneer. He also unleashed a treasured sword, and under the circulation of sword intent, this treasured tool awakened, exuding a sharp aura. Even if it hadn't reached the shattering void tier, it wasn't far. Dong Ling also unleashed her sword. She hadn't grasped sword heart yet, but she had her own strong points. The power of her bloodline was activated, and 2 long wings unfurled behind her back, as well as a phoenix tail woven from light and shadow, as if turning into a colorful wind. The 4 great young king tiers joined forces to seal off the entrance, and on top of the absolute saber and mountain and river axe, it could be said to be impregnable. Even for shattering void tier elites, there weren't many who could charge through by force. Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword, and said with a smile, then I'll charge for you guys. Chapter 8:10. Without hesitation, Ling Han flew out and charged straight towards the passageway leading to the 4th level. As long as he charged in, Su Xiu ran and the others naturally couldn't follow. The Revere Life Sword automatically revived under the aura of the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe. The formation patterns glowed, and its killing intent burned the heavens. Ling Han didn't unleash the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation again. He only needed to force his way through now, and didn't need to defeat these 4 people. The difficulty was on a completely different level. Could it be that the Revere Life Sword couldn't even block the combined attack of the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe? What a joke. Get lost. The 4 young elites attacked together, and even used such great killing weapons like the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe. Even shattering void tier elites wouldn't dare to take their edge. However, Ling Han charged through forcefully. The Revere Life Sword emitted endless formation patterns light, wrapping him tightly as he charged towards the door. Hung, hung, hung. In the fierce clash, Ling Han couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, but he forcefully broke through the 4 young kings' joint blockade and threw himself into the door. Once he entered, he immediately took out the Flower of Dead Souls. Wang, this strange flower that came from the netherworld instantly emitted a dark light, suppressing the boiling flames in the surroundings. These flames had no effect on the physical body, but directly entered the spirit, wanting to burn his spirit to ashes, and the Flower of Dead Souls just happened to be able to restrain it. As for why it could restrain it, Ling Han couldn't explain it either. He only knew that the effect was indeed very good. He turned around, and saw that Su Xiu, Ran and the others' expressions were very strange. They didn't look dispirited because he barged in, but were instead sneering, looking as if he was a fool. Ling Han, we all know that you possess a spatial divine tool, but deliberately revealed the use of the flower of dead souls. Do you think we're stupid? Su Xiu Ran sneered. Dong Ling continued, wrong, we said those words deliberately for you to hear. The flower of dead souls is indeed the key to passing the 4th level, but it's only one of them. The other key is to cultivate the heart of martial art, or else you'll also be burned to ashes. After you die, we will come in and take away the flower of dead souls. In any case, you won't be able to go far in your current state, the small sword emperor said indifferently. Ling Han gave an "oh" and said with a smile, you guys are purposely saying this to me because you want to keep me here as long as possible. On the other hand, you are blocking the exit so that I can only stay here and wait for the flower of dead souls to be taken back. Now that I think about it, you guys didn't stop me with your full strength. That's right. Wouldn't it be easier to use this natural killing ground to kill you? The Son of Lightning said indifferently. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, since you know that I have a spatial god artifact, don't you know that as long as I hide inside, no matter how bad the environment outside is, it can affect me? Do you think that we don't know the effects of a spatial artifact just because we haven't seen one? Dong Ling sneered. A spatial artifact is only convenient. It can't completely isolate the environment. Even if you hide in it, you can't escape death. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, then even if I die, I won't give you the flower of dead souls and the spatial artifact. You guys didn't find it before, right? Now, you won't be able to find it in the future either. Hearing this, Su Xiu Ran and the others all frowned. This was indeed what they were worried about. They had only heard of spatial artifacts, but had never seen one before. How would they know how to take it? Su Xiu Ran thought for a moment, and said, hand over the flower of dead souls and the spatial artifact, and we can let you live. Seeing that Ling Han didn't seem to care, he waved his hand, and said, I can swear. We can swear too, Dong Ling, and the others said. Compared to the preciousness of the true dragon's tooth and the spatial artifact, Ling Han's life could naturally be set aside first. After all, he hadn't matured yet, and the 5 great sects had plenty of elites who could kill him. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, don't you guys know that I'm a person who is unafraid of death? I'm not going to chat with you guys anymore. Goodbye. He turned around and left. Su Xiu Ran and the others didn't expect this. In their minds, Ling Han was definitely a smart person, and how could a smart person possibly make such a choice? This was a lose-lose situation, and they would only be lightly injured at most, losing a flower of dead souls. But for Ling Han, that was his life. No matter how they thought about it, Ling Han wasn't someone who was unafraid of death, as he boasted. Could he have cultivated sword heart? Su Xiu Ran's expression changed. He had fought with Ling Han the most, and was relatively more familiar with Ling Han's personality. Dong Ling, and the others' expressions changed as well. This wasn't impossible. Previously, Ling Han had already touched the edge of sword heart, which was why he could kill Jia Ming without being affected by Su Xiu Ran, the small sword emperor. Other people couldn't do it in such a short time, but how could Ling Han be an ordinary person? Then this is a bit bad. Sword heart and the flower of dead souls were enough to resist the soul-burning fire of the 4th level, so obtaining the true dragon's tooth was definitely not difficult. And there was no use for them to guard this place. Once the time limit was up, Ling Han was naturally sent out of the ghostly dragon cave. We'll guard here first. If we can't stop Ling Han when the time is up, we'll immediately return to the middle state and ask an almighty to make a move. We must kill this boy. That's right. With the true dragon's tooth and a spatial divine tool, he's definitely worthy of an almighty to make a move. The 4 of them sat at the entrance and waited patiently. Before they came, there was only one thing worth making a move in this ghostly dragon cave, and that was the true dragon's tooth. They simply didn't want to waste time looking for other treasures. With the flower of dead souls in hand, Ling Han walked in this sea of fire as steady as Mount Tai, extremely calm. Disregarding the burning of the soul, the lethality of these flames towards the physical body was almost zero. Furthermore, the soul had the protection of the flower of dead souls and the support of the sword heart, so there was nothing to fear here. He strode forward. The structure of the fourth floor was extremely simple. It was just a path that led to the end, so he had no choice but to continue forward. It was said that the true dragon's tooth was at the end of this passage, but no one could obtain it. They could only look at it from afar. The passageway was very long, and after half a day, Ling Han finally reached the end. There was a stone altar in front of him. It was very big, but there was a corporeal purple halo around it that enveloped the altar. Up until now, no one had been able to pass through this layer of light. Otherwise, if someone had been able to enter and come out, how could they not have obtained the true dragon's tooth? At the center of the sacrificial altar was an enormous tooth that was 3 m long and completely jade white. It was like an exquisite work of art, and it was pleasing to the eye. Moreover, even from such a distance, Ling Han could still sense the majestic power that the teeth exuded. Tooth of the True Dragon. Chapter 8:11. Ding Ping screamed in pain every day under Ling Han's training, but his improvement was also very obvious. It was unknown what kind of bloodline he possessed, or perhaps it was due to the heaven's blessing that he possessed some kind of powerful physique that could allow his power to explode 100-fold. This was extremely terrifying. Merely this ability could allow him to possess battle prowess that surpassed 2 stars in the immortal level. Permanent. The difference in power between each sub-minor level should be about 10 times, so a 100-fold explosion could make up for the difference between 2 sub-minor levels. This could also show how big the gap between each sub-minor level was. That was why there were so few geniuses that surpassed 4 stars, and 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. Ling Han wanted to squeeze out all of Ding Ping's potential, and train him into a dazzling, awesome disciple. 4 days later, the reincarnation tree was finally fully grown. The crown of the tree was 300 meters tall, and there was an aura of the great Tao circulating between the branches and leaves. It was mysterious, powerful, and simple. Ling Han had clearly watched it grow, yet it gave him a feeling as if this great tree had already experienced the vicissitudes of millions and millions of years. The reincarnation tree that needed 12 trillion years to grow had grown just like that. The Black Tower was even more awesome. Ling Han sighed with emotion. His rise couldn't be separated from the help of the Black Tower. Otherwise, even if he hadn't died in his last life, he would only have been able to become an alchemy emperor by now. As for cultivation, it was because the foundation he had built in the early stages was really too pitiful, so his achievements would definitely be limited. This reincarnation tree isn't growing normally. Rather, it's growing because I've used my origin power to accelerate it. Thus, its effects are slightly weaker. Small Tower appeared, and explained to Ling Han, comprehending Tao under the tree is far from reaching the point where a moment is a lifetime, but a day is equivalent to a year. This was already impressive enough. After another 10 years, the leaves can be plucked and made into tea leaves, and the effects will be slightly better. I estimate that drinking a cup will allow you to obtain 10 years' worth of spiritual comprehension. Unfortunately, my origin power has been exhausted again, and I can't accelerate it any further. Ling Han was already beyond delighted, and said, enough, this is already impressive enough. That's because you're a frog in a well, and you don't know that there are many treasures that can accelerate time. Small Tower probably had let the cat out of the bag, and hurriedly shut its mouth. I'm going to repair the Black Tower, don't come and bother me if there's nothing important. As it spoke, it disappeared with a schwa, and no matter how Ling Han called out, it was unwilling to reappear. Fuck, in any case, I'm still its master, isn't this too disrespectful? Ling Han gritted his teeth. This small tower was really too tsundere. No matter what, I need to improve the strength of the people around me first. Ling Han brought Shui Yenyu, Feng Peyun, and the others into the Black Tower so that they could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree. This was crazy. At their level, the only thing they lacked was time to comprehend Tao, but one day under the reincarnation tree was equivalent to 1 year. What kind of concept was this? Even a stupid pig could cultivate to become a true god. At first, it was the speed at which they comprehended the mysteries of heaven and earth that could not keep up with the improvement of their origin power and physical strength, but now it was the exact opposite. Their spiritual cultivation had surpassed their physical bodies, and it was their physical bodies that were dragging them down. Thankfully, Ling Han was the alchemy emperor. If ordinary cultivation could not keep up, then he could just ingest alchemical pills. In any case, he was comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree, so there was no need to fear that his cultivation level would rise too quickly. But the first to break through was Ling Han. He was already at the peak stage of the medium extreme, and now with the help of the reincarnation tree, the speed at which he comprehended Tao was practically like the speed of light. If ordinary prodigies wanted to take this step, they would need at least a few hundred years. Even if Ling Han was a super prodigy, he would still need a few dozen years, right? But under the reincarnation tree, a few dozen years was only a few dozen days. Most importantly, Ling Han's physical strength also had the essence of a demonic master, which solved the problem of accumulating origin power. With these two factors working in tandem, what need was there to worry that his cultivation level could not soar? He steered the cloud-piercing shuttle and left the Great Ling Empire ahead of time, heading towards an uninhabited wasteland to undergo his heavenly tribulation. Since there were undercurrents surging in the Great Ling Empire, and there were people who wanted to rebel, then he would give them a chance. Otherwise, if these ambitious people lay dormant, then when they erupted in the future, the harm they would cause would be even greater. Thus, Ling Han strictly sealed off the news of his return. Now, he naturally could not choose to undergo his heavenly tribulation in the Great Ling Empire either. Advancing a minor level was practically torture for Ling Han now. He had to shatter his own body, and allow his godly bones to be tempered by the heavenly tribulation in order to advance another level. This caused him to scream repeatedly. If Ding Ping heard this, he would definitely feel much more at ease. This freak of a master actually had times where he could scream so miserably. Half a day later, the heavenly tribulation dissipated. Ling Han used a drop of indestructible true fluid, and his body instantly recovered. He only felt that his power had skyrocketed, and his godly bones were incredibly hard, reaching the level of level 4 godly metal. Now, though I can't suppress an opponent at the peak stage of the consummate level, I'm completely unafraid. Even if it's a battle of attrition, I can still exhaust my opponent to death, Ling Han said with a smile. His defense and recovery ability were practically at the level of a scoundrel. As long as he couldn't be insta-killed, then his opponent would definitely despair. Aside from Ling Han, the Rain Emperor's improvement was the fastest. His talent was practically no weaker than Ling Han's. It was just that he wasn't as lucky as Ling Han, who had obtained the Black Tower. 2 months later, the Rain Emperor's power advanced to 19 stars of shattering void tier. The might of the reincarnation tree was completely displayed. The Rain Emperor began to comprehend the secrets of the immortal level, and with Ling Han and Shui Yenyu's explanation, with the Rain Emperor's talent, he definitely wouldn't need a few days to advance. Of course, comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree for a few days was equivalent to comprehending Tao for a few years. After another dozen or so days, Feng Peyun's power also advanced to 18 stars of shattering void tier, while Mu Rongqing's was 17 stars. This also showed the difference in talent between the 4 brothers. The Rain Emperor and Ling Han were practically equal, Feng Peyun was slightly inferior, and Mu Rongqing was slightly inferior. But even so, it still gave Shui Yenyu a fright. That was the power of 17 stars of shattering void tier, and the battle prowess he could display would be at least 22 stars, or perhaps even stronger. How many such prodigies could be found in the chaotic star's majestic empire? The tiny Great Ling Empire, however, had 4. Moreover, Hellion Tianyun had also reached 16 stars, which was still extremely terrifying, and Ling Han's disciple Ding Ping was also a little monster. He could explode with power that was 100 times stronger. If he could also reach the power of 18 stars of shattering void tier, or 19 stars of shattering void tier before breaking through again, then after he advanced into the immortal level, his battle prowess could even surpass 6 stars. 6 stars, just thinking about it made Shui Yenyu feel terrified. That was because 5-star geniuses only existed in legends, and now, there was actually a possibility that a 6-star genius had appeared. Even Ling Han could not compare to him. Ling Han would not be jealous of his own disciple. Moreover, power was only the most important aspect of battle prowess, and not everything. He believed that if the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping battled at the same cultivation level, the one who would lose would definitely be Ding Ping. If it was him, Ding Ping would have even less of a chance of victory. There was no way to deal with a freakish physique and recovery ability. Furthermore, Ling Han discovered that his current power was becoming greater and greater. The 9 Dragons Tyrant Body Art and Universal 8 Desolation Technique were both supreme secret techniques that caused his physical strength to explode, and his origin power to be refined. Vaguely, his pure power had already reached the height of 5 stars. Another few days passed, and the Rain Emperor, Feng Peyun, and Mu Rongqing broke through to the mountain river tier 1 after another. The Great Ling Empire finally had a sliver of the appearance of a royal dynasty. Chapter 8:12. The boy couldn't help but be startled. Why would you guess that? Fuck, if you're not that alternative dragon, how could you extract the essence of the true dragon's tooth? Furthermore, you look so old and decrepit, making people want to beat you up. Ling Han said in a bad mood, but he didn't hit him again. He casually tossed the boy to the side and then threw him a set of clothes. The boy put it on, but this was Ling Han's clothes, and it was really a bit too big for him. It covered his hands and feet, and it dragged on the ground. He couldn't help feeling depressed. Is there no smaller clothes? There is, but it's for girls. Do you want it? Ling Han said. The boy hesitated and shook his head. I'll just wear this. He rolled up his sleeves and trousers, but the clothes were too loose, and it still looked inappropriate. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Since you know my identity, you still dare to laugh at me. Are you tired of living? The boy said fiercely. Pa! Ling Han knocked him on the head, and the boy immediately hugged his head and cried out in pain. What, didn't I beat you into submission just now? The boy didn't understand and said, why aren't you affected by my dragon might? Although I've lost all my cultivation and have to start all over again, my dragon might is the strongest in the world, and any descendant of the dragon race will be affected by me. Ling Han clicked his tongue and said, open your dog eyes wide and look carefully. How am I a descendant of the dragon race? What, you're actually not a descendant of the dragon race? The boy's face was full of disbelief. But I clearly feel the aura of the dragon race on you. This was very normal. His wife was a dragon, and his son also had the dragon race's bloodline. Furthermore, he also cultivated the 9 Dragons Tyrant Body Art, so it wasn't strange for him to have some dragon scent on him. Ling Han picked the boy up and said, I forgot to ask you, what's your name again? The little boy tried his best to put on a serious expression, and crossed his arms over his arms, pretending to be deep in thought. However, as Ling Han grabbed him by the collar, and his body continued to spin around, his seriousness instantly disappeared. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, even if you're not a descendant of the dragon race, I'm still your senior from who knows how many years ago. You must maintain due respect for me. Moreover, this vast land still needs me to save it. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. Back then, the flood dragon was incomparably powerful. Even the gods couldn't kill it when they descended to the lower realm. It must have known the truth behind the reckoning. Now that he had been reborn after countless years, he definitely wouldn't be content to die of old age here. Is the so-called salvation also splitting open the sky? He didn't ask directly, but said, "Don't think that I don't know. This damned place requires the flower of dead souls to enter. It must be your doing, and it definitely has something to do with your reincarnation. You should know that I was the one who brought the flower of dead souls, and I am your savior. Why are you still acting like a senior in front of me? Is your butt itching again?" Although the flower of dead souls was actually brought by Su Xiu Ran and the others, did Ling Han need to explain it clearly to the other party? The little boy couldn't help but weaken. Ling Han was right. The key to his rebirth was the flower of dead souls. This was indispensable, and from this point of view, Ling Han was indeed his savior. He humphed, and said, "Fine, I'll tell you my real name. My surname is Helion, and my name is Tian Yun. I'm the strongest dragon in the vast lands." He was immensely proud, making Ling Han look down on him. After living a new life, this flood dragon's personality also changed greatly. Otherwise, would there be a need for an ultimate elite of 20 stars of shattering void tier to be so arrogant? Such an existence didn't need the approval of others at all, and could even rival the gods that descended to the lower realm. He was indescribably strong. However, surnamed Helion, could it be that he was Helion Rong's ancestor? Then he definitely couldn't know that his wife was Helion Sun Shui. Otherwise, this guy would definitely be extremely arrogant, putting on airs as an elder in front of him. Ling Han stretched out his hand, full of threat, and then said, "You've obviously been dead for who knows how many millennia, so how did you come back to life?" What kind of elite am I? What's so strange about living a second life?" Helion Tianyun snorted. Ling Han naturally wouldn't believe it. In the immortal realm, it was an incredibly difficult thing for a soul to reincarnate, and it was obviously even more difficult in the lower realm. However, this was the first time they had met, and even if he owed him a life-saving debt, how could Helion Tianyun easily reveal his secret? If one wanted to know other people's secrets, one had to first reveal one's own to win the trust of others. Ling Han said, "The saving of the vast lands that you speak of, is it referring to splitting open the skies?" Even though this was the ghostly dragon cave, which could be said to be an independent world, when Ling Han said the two words, "splitting open the skies," a thunderous sound still rang out in the surroundings. Helion Tianyun couldn't help but be shocked, and said, "You freak, you're actually not tolerated by heaven and earth. No, you really have the possibility of being a threat to this world, and that's why heaven and earth are resonating with you, wanting to draw out the lightning tribulation to kill you." Ling Han's face couldn't help but darken. Having an old freak from who knew how many millennia ago point at his face and call him a freak, no matter how he looked at it, it made him feel uncomfortable. Just how long did I sleep for such a strange person to actually appear in this world? Helion Tianyun said, clutching his head. I still wanted to save the common people of the world and become the savior of the world, but I didn't expect that my business would actually be stolen by someone else. Fuck, why didn't I wake up earlier? Restrain your grief, Ling Han said from the side. There's no one in my family who died, what's there to grieve about? Helion Tianyun said in a bad mood. Ling Han was speechless. Thinking about it, this alternative dragon should also have been an idiot in the past. As the saying went, it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but difficult to change a person's nature. Even if he had changed after living a second life, it was impossible for him to have changed too much. Only an idiot who was born to be an idiot would be like this. However, you mentioned splitting open the sky, so you must know the truth about the divine realm reckoning, Helion Tianyun quickly said with a serious expression. Ling Han nodded, and said, back then, you didn't shatter the void and become a god because you discovered the Sky Lock Great Formation, right? That's right. I originally thought that after cultivating to the extreme, shattering the void shouldn't be a problem, but I didn't expect that I still wouldn't be a match. Hellion Tianyun sighed. Fortunately, I had a backup plan. Although I was seriously injured at that time, I still managed to escape and return. Moreover, I passed away here while sitting cross-legged, but I left a bit of my divine sense in the dragon tooth, seeking life in death. When I was young, I once obtained a divine medicine that could allow the soul to complete a transformation. So, I simply hardened my heart and abandoned my original body, using the true dragon's tooth to nurture my body anew. I cultivated this tooth to the level of a true dragon, and even in the divine realm, it would be an incredible treasure. Now, after countless years, the essence of the dragon's tooth has condensed into my body, and through the flower of dead souls, my soul has completed the final leap, and I have finally come back to life. At that time, although my body was already very strong, it was still not enough to withstand the mental power of all the living beings in the world, but this time, it definitely can. Chapter 8:13. In his previous life, Hellion Tianyun had thought of splitting open the skies, but splitting open the skies required establishing a nation. After all, one's power was limited, and the vast lands didn't have the conditions to become a god. Without the support of power of the nation, no one's power was strong enough to split open the skies. Even gods couldn't do it, exploding with super powerful power would only be rejected by the world. However, with the support of power of the nation, it was different. Because one's own tier didn't surpass it, the world had its own rules that needed to be obeyed, or else splitting open the skies would be empty talk. However, with the support of power of the nation, it was also a huge burden for one's own body. How could it work without a strong enough physique? Even with the strength of the dragon race's physique and the strength of the alternative dragon back then, he still didn't choose to split open the skies, because he knew that he couldn't bear the power of the nation formed by the mental power of everyone in the world. In this life, Hellion Tianyun reconstructed his body with the true dragon's tooth, so if he cultivated back to the shattering void tier, his physique would naturally be stronger, and perhaps he really could bear the mental power of everyone in the world. However, now that there's a monster like you, this lord can relax a bit, and no longer have to shoulder the responsibility of splitting open the skies. Hellion Tianyun laughed mischievously. Even the heaven and earth were moved, which means that the possibility of your success is extremely high. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, "You're really lucky, finally waiting for the flower of dead souls. This thing is an item of the netherworld, and perhaps you won't be able to wait for it in your lifetime. I don't believe that this true dragon's tooth can make your soul immortal for eternity." That's why I say that this lord is a man of great fortune, destined to live, Hellion Tianyun said with a smile. Then you plan to help me? Ling Han asked. That's natural. Even if this lord is reborn, he still doesn't have the confidence to break through that great sky lock formation, so I can only place my hopes on splitting open the skies, Hellion Tianyun said. When he spoke of that great sky lock formation, he couldn't help but shiver. Back then, it made him suffer heavy injuries and almost die, so he naturally had lingering fears. Ling Han smiled and said, "You are only at the refinement realm now. What can you help me with?" "Bah, my current body is nurtured by the true dragon's tooth. In addition, I reached the pinnacle of humanity in my previous life. In this life, I'm walking the old path again, and there won't be the slightest bit of bottleneck. As long as I'm given a few years, coupled with enough cultivation resources, it won't be difficult for me to return to the pinnacle of humanity. Moreover, my dragon might will only be stronger than before. Any dragon can only obediently lower their heads in front of me," Hellion Tianyun said proudly. This function was quite useful. If Hellion Tianyun could conquer the sea, then with him and Ma Duobao on land, wouldn't the whole vast lands be settled when the two of them combined their territories? Not bad, not bad. Although he was tricked by this flood dragon, it was not like he did not gain anything. Ling Han turned around and said, however, the flower of dead souls has been absorbed by you, so how should we get out? Stupid, this place is transformed from my body, and is used to protect my soul while using the true dragon's tooth to attract people to bring the flower of dead souls. Now that I've come into being, there's naturally no need for this place to exist, Helian Tianyun said disdainfully. True, although he was so weak now that he could be poked down with a finger, it couldn't change the fact that he was once an flood dragon. Ling Han hesitated, and said, I'll introduce you to a few people. Yeah. Helian Tianyun looked very surprised. There wasn't even a ghost here, so where were you going to introduce me to a few people? But before he finished his thought, he saw that there really were a few more people beside him. This gave him a fright, and then he said in shock, Spatial Divine Tool. It's actually a spatial divine tool. This brat is indeed favored by the heavens, to actually be able to obtain a spatial divine tool. His gaze swept over, and he couldn't help but make a sound of surprise. He said, these are descendants of the dragon race, I can smell the scent on their bodies. He pointed at Helian Sun Shui and Ling Jian Shui. Helian Sun Shui looked at Ling Han with a puzzled gaze, and asked, who is this child? Your ancestor. Helian Tianyun said in an old-fashioned manner. Helian Sun Shui naturally wouldn't believe that this little brat actually dared to take advantage of her. She immediately stretched out her hand to knock the other's head, but she had just stretched out her hand when, Wang, a supreme dragon's might came over, causing her delicate body to instantly go weak. Her legs couldn't even stand properly, and she fell backwards. Ling Han reached out his hand to support her, and caught her in his arms. Ling Jian Shui, however, was furious. Although the little guy was only half a year old, his intelligence couldn't be measured by normal people. He immediately jumped out of Helian Sun Shui's arms, lay on the ground, and roared at Helian Tianyun. Helian Tianyun was shocked. This little brat has such a deep true dragon bloodline, actually being able to match this lord's dragon's might. Aya! He screamed, because Ling Jian Shui had already pounced on him and delivered a punch to his face, blasting him to the ground. Although he was once an alternative dragon, and his dragon's might was even more terrifying, in terms of strength, he was only in the body refining tier, while Ling Jian Shui's brute force had already reached the gushing spring tier. The battle prowess of the two was naturally not on the same level. The little guy beat him up, and Helian Tianyun could only scream in pain. Who asked him to bully the other party's mother? However, Helian Tianyun was only happy, and said, this little guy isn't bad. This lord wants to take him as a disciple, and teach him the supreme techniques of the dragon race. A strange expression appeared on Ling Han's face, and he said, are you sure you want to take my son as a disciple? Your son? Helian Tianyun was shocked, and said, no wonder his bloodline is so pure, and he can resist this lord's dragon's might. Ha, this brat is definitely my disciple. Whoever fights with this lord will fight with that person. He was trampled under Ling Jian Shui's foot without any regard for his image, and was still shouting. Ling Han muttered something to Helian Sun Shui in a low voice, causing Helian Sun Shui to instantly widen her beautiful eyes. This was really an ancestor, but if Helian Tianyun took Ling Jian Shui as a disciple, then wouldn't he be of the same generation as her and Ling Han? What kind of mess would that be? Ling Han nodded, and said, all right, on account of your seniority, my son will be your disciple. He picked Ling Jian Shui up, and then said, since you've taken a disciple, then what about the meeting gift? In any case, you're also an alternative dragon. If you're not generous enough, then everyone will look down on you. Helian Tianyun laughed dryly. His body was transformed into the ghostly dragon cave, and so many years had passed. He left and came back naked, so how could he have any treasures to take out? He hurriedly said, this lord will teach this brat everything I've learned in my life. This is more precious than anything. Forget it, I know you're poor. Ling Han casually scattered a few spirit herbs, and said, here, take them and refine them. Quickly increase your strength, don't even lose to your own disciples' strength. Hellion Tianyun chuckled, not embarrassed at all. He picked up the spirit herbs and gnawed on them. In just a moment, the aura all over his body skyrocketed, and he actually stepped into the Pali realm. Sure enough, he didn't have any cultivation bottlenecks, and he didn't need to accumulate the slightest bit. Breaking through was as easy as drinking water. Chapter 8:14. Ling Han simply laid out a feast, using all kinds of precious meats and ingredients, including extremely high-level beast meat, 10,000-year treasured pearl, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng, all of which were cooked together in a pot. Although he had no culinary skills, these ingredients were too precious. Just cooking them together was fresh and fragrant, making one's mouth water. Hellion Tianyun also drooled disappointingly, and said, 10,000-year treasured pearl, even this lord didn't get one back then, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng, this lord has only eaten one, it's all Nyo's, don't take it, Hunyo said fiercely. Hellion Tianyun finally noticed Hunyo, and his eyes lit up as he said, little girl, you're betrothed to someone else? How about this lord? He's just right for you. Peng peng peng. The consequence of this cheap mouth was naturally a beating. Hunyo didn't go easy, beating Hellion Tianyun until he wanted to cry, making him extremely gloomy. In his last life, he was an invincible existence, so why was he beaten 3 times by 3 people now that he was born? Why didn't his dragon's might work again? Stinking brat, don't tell me this little girl is your daughter, he cried miserably. Otherwise, how could she not be affected by his draconic might? This was not only effective against the dragon race, but also against other races. It was just that it was not as effective as the dragon race. Nyo is Ling Han's, Hunyo said fiercely, stomping her little feet until Hellion Tianyun was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Hellion Tianyun was gloomy. Why did all the good stuff get stolen by Ling Han? His peerlessly talented disciple was his son, and this weird little beauty was also his little wife. After it was cooked, everyone fought over the food. Even heaven-tier elites didn't dare to eat too much of such ingredients, at most drinking a few mouthfuls of soup, or their bodies would explode. However, Ling Han, Hunyo, Hellion Sun Shui, and Hellion Tianyun were all big eaters, eating happily. However, Hellion Sun Shui was first, full, not because her stomach couldn't eat anymore, but because she couldn't take more energy essence, and had to sit on the side to refine it. Ling Han, Hunyo, and Hellion Tianyun were still crazily eating, and did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Hellion Tianyun became even more depressed, and said, I was nurtured by the true dragon's tooth, so my body is strong and powerful. No amount of energy can break my body. But what's going on with the 2 of you? You can actually eat even more than I can. He felt that he was about to reach his limit. After all, his current cultivation was too low. It's useless. Hunyo rolled her eyes at him, meaning that he was too weak. Hellion Tianyun could only be speechless. After eating a few more mouthfuls of meat, he could only sit to one side and start refining. He was really a monster, breaking through a few small tiers in an instant and advancing into the gushing spring tier, finally being able to compete with Ling Jian Shui. But after that, it would not be so simple for him to increase his cultivation level. After all, the higher his cultivation level, the more terrifying the amount of energy needed, especially for advancing from the heaven tier to the shattering void tier. The amount of energy needed was astonishing. But to him, it would only take 1 or 2 years, at most 2 or 3 years. Like Ling Han and Hunyo, there was almost no obvious improvement. After all, their battle prowess had reached the heaven tier, so it was naturally difficult to improve further. Let's go, it's time to leave this place. Ling Han snapped his fingers. After cleaning up the pots and bowls, they walked back. Su Xiu ran and the others should still be guarding the entrance, Ling Han said. This time, there's no terrain advantage, so we'll have to fight it out. Hey, Hellion Tianyun jumped out. He did not believe that the world was full of monsters like Ling Han and Hun Yo who were not affected by his dragon's might. Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, "Don't die right after you're born, at least leave a few mystical powers for my son." "You jinx!" Hellion Tianyun shouted in anger. Unfortunately, he no longer had the valor he had in the past, or else he would definitely teach this human a good lesson. He actually dared to look down on him, the great alternative dragon. They came to the entrance, and sure enough, Su Xiu ran and the others had already discovered the commotion. They stood up one after another and blocked the entrance. Hellion Tianyun swaggered a few steps forward, and snorted. "Juniors, why don't you kneel when you see me?" Su Xiu ran and the others already knew that Ling Han had a spatial divine tool, so they were naturally not surprised by the addition of a little brat and completely ignored him. Dong Ling said, "Ling Han, hand over the true dragon's tooth and the spatial divine tool. You should know that you definitely can't leave here alive." Hellion Tianyun was furious. Too hateful, ignoring him again. Moreover, he wanted the true dragon's tooth. Wasn't he the true dragon's tooth? He snorted, and Wang, dragon's might was unleashed, charging towards the four people mightily. N. Ya, Su Xiu ran and the others all grunted. Under the pressure of the dragon's might, their faces all turned pale. Even if they were all kings of martial arts, under such dragon's might, they still had a feeling of difficulty breathing. Wang, Su Xiu ran immediately revived the absolute saber, and an absolutely powerful saber intent circulated, instantly blocking the dragon's might. The son of lightning wasn't slow, either, and similarly drew out the mountain and river axe. This precious tool shone and also blocked the dragon's might. Hellion Tianyun couldn't help but feel bitter in his mouth. His dragon's might was blocked again, so how could he endure this? Thankfully, these two juniors didn't block it with their own abilities, but with two spirit tools. Otherwise, he really would have cried. He stared at the two spirit tools for a while, and muttered, "Those are replicas of the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe." Once he recognized them, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. The first master of the absolute saber was even an elite of the immortal realm, and that mountain and river axe was formed from the realm power and source power of this realm. Even if it was just a replica, it still had some special might, and it was reasonable that it could rival his dragon's might. Su Xiu ran and the son of lightning could resist the dragon's might, but the small sword emperor and Dong Ling couldn't. Even if they also had level 10 spirit tools bestowed by their elders, they had no effect on the dragon's might. After all, this was an alternative dragon that had once been invincible in the world. Su Xiu ran and the son of lightning hurriedly guarded Dong Ling and the small sword emperor, lest Ling Han took the opportunity to kill them. In this way, their battle prowess instantly dropped to 2. Though they still had the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, their threat was greatly reduced after all. Ling Han laughed, and used the Revere Life Sword to open the way, charging out. Though Su Xiu ran and the son of lightning attacked with all their might, suppressing the Revere Life Sword wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Ling Han didn't linger in battle, and left with his people, leaving Su Xiu ran and the others in a dilemma whether to chase or not. If they chased, what if Ling Han and the others turned back? What would Dong Ling and the small sword emperor do then? If they didn't chase, the other party must have obtained the true dragon's tooth. Were they supposed to just watch them leave? But in the end, they still didn't give chase. After a good while, the small sword emperor and Dong Shui finally recovered from the trembling of the dragon's might, and they both revealed expressions of fear. How could this aura be so terrifying? The situation has already gone beyond the scope of our control. Return to the middle state immediately, and ask the sect's ultimate elites to act, kill Ling Han, and take back the true dragon's tooth. That little boy is also very terrifying, actually able to emit an incomparably terrifying dragon's might. We can't let him go, either. Chapter 8:15. Ling Han had returned, and he was incredibly powerful at that. The members of the 5 sects had long since been traumatized by Ling Han. When he appeared, they were already trembling and feeling numb. Moreover, Situ Jian's head had been exploded with a single punch, causing them to feel a chill run down their spines. They wanted nothing more than to turn around and flee. Ling Han, the Sword King, stepped forward. Although he was a rising star in the 5 sects, his strength was truly extraordinary. Sword cultivators were renowned for their powerful attacks, and his battle prowess could definitely rank in the top 10, or even the top 5. Pa! Ling Han's figure flashed, and his fist shot out. The Sword King's head had also exploded. Gasp, he killed someone just because they didn't agree with him. How brutal. Ling Han, you've gone too far. You have to know that there are elites of the Sun-Moon tier in our ancestral grounds, the heaven-shattering saber said harshly. Pa, as soon as he finished speaking, his head exploded as well. He had killed 3 people in a row, all with a single punch. There was no hesitation, and there was no mercy. Just how decisive was he? The members of the 5 sects were all terrified. They didn't even see how Situ Jian and the others had died. They only saw Ling Han's figure flash, and they died one after another. If this had happened to them, they definitely wouldn't have been able to block or dodge it. This was too terrifying. Zhang Yimou and the other members of the younger generation were all trembling in fear. It had only been 2 years, yet Ling Han had already grown to such a terrifying extent. What cultivation level are you at now? The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress asked with a bitter expression. I've only improved a little. I'm a little embarrassed to say it. Ling Han smiled, and said, I'm at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. I've only just advanced to the early stage. Pooh! Everyone choked upon hearing this. You're showing off, you're definitely. 2 years ago, they had just split open the sky, and everyone had started from the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. However, the members of the 5 sects still had cultivation techniques from the immortal realm, and that was why 37 people had broken through to the immortal level. But what about Ling Han? He really had no one to rely on. Moreover, he had even been captured and taken as a hostage. Are you sure you're really going to be a hostage, and not a slave to Grandpa Ma? Run! It wasn't clear who was the first to shout. Immediately, everyone scattered like birds and beasts. The members of the 5 sects were all too aware of the strength of immortals, and they were even more aware that the difference between each sub-minor level was a world of difference. Thus, 1-star geniuses were all praiseworthy, but Ling Han had now actually stepped into the high extreme. This was an absolute suppression. Putting aside the fact that there were only 37 of them, even if there were 370 of them, they would still be completely annihilated. Fight for what? They would only be seeking death. Kill. Meanwhile, the morale of the Great Ling Empire's side was boiling. Everyone attacked one after another, especially the Rain Emperor and the other immortal level elites. They had just stepped into this cultivation level, and their hands were very itchy. Let's go. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress grabbed Dong Ling, and a pair of wings spread out behind her. She and Dong Ling, both had a special bloodline, and could fly at the mountain river tier, so they had a great advantage. The Rain Emperor shot out a furious punch, and though Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was barely able to withstand it, she still flew into the skies after all. This time, who could still stop them from leaving? Ling Han, just you wait. As long as I find the way back, it will be the time for the elites of our 5 sects to take your life. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress said harshly. She knew that these 30 or so immortal level elites were completely insufficient in front of someone at the high extreme. This wasn't a battle, but rather a one-sided massacre. Ling Han shook his head, and said, for her sake, I originally wanted to spare your life, but you are seeking death yourself. He used his body as a bow, and drew the annihilating dragon star arrow. Xiao, the arrow light turned into a streak of light, and shot out swiftly. What cultivation level was he at now? Even if he didn't use a real bow and arrow, and didn't use the ultimate arrow, the might of the annihilating dragon star arrow was still enough to surpass 5 stars. He was merely in the early stage of the low extreme, so could he block the battle prowess of the middle stage of the consummate level? Pooh! The arrow light streaked past, and Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and Dong Ling both released agonized screams. They had been killed with one arrow, and their hearts had both been pierced through. The eyes of master and disciple instantly lost their luster, and their exquisite and beautiful faces were dim and lifeless. They both fell from the skies. Since they were enemies, then what difference did it make whether they were men or women? With him and the Azura Demon Emperor overseeing things, even if the 5 sects had an advantage in terms of the number of elites, so what? They would still only be slaughtered. Moreover, though the Rain Emperor and the others had just broken through, they had comprehended Tao under the reincarnation tree. Which one of them hadn't comprehended Tao for a few decades? Furthermore, they had also received the support of Ling Han's resources, and their cultivation in the Shattering Void tier had almost reached a perfect level. Even Murong Qing had 4 stars of battle prowess, and the Rain Emperor had even reached 5 stars. In truth, there was no need for Ling Han to make a move. Merely his 3 brothers would be enough to wipe them out. In a mere hour, the elites of the 5 sects had all been slaughtered. Not only immortal level elites, but Shattering Void tier elites had also naturally come, and all of them had been killed. Your Majesty, spare us. The remaining rebel forces all knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Their cultivation level was too low, and there wasn't even a Shattering Void tier elite among them. In this kind of battle, they wouldn't be of any use at all. Just a pressure from the Emperor was enough to make them kneel on the ground. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually appear at this moment, and he was as powerful as a heaven god? This caused them to recall the scene when Ling Han had split open the skies. He alone had supported the heavens, and split open the universe, possessing an incomparably divine might. They actually wanted to rebel against such a person. Fuck, had water gotten into their heads back then? Seize them, and execute them at the Meridian Gate, Ling Han said coldly. There were some limits that could not be crossed. Otherwise, how could he rule the country, and how could he convince the masses? With a single thought, the cultivation of these traitors was all crippled. Like wolves and tigers, the guards charged forward and seized these traitors. All of them deliberately punched and kicked them. These guards naturally hated these traitors to the core. How many things had Ling Han done for the lower realm, and they actually dared to rebel while he was away as a hostage? Fuck, they really wanted to kill this bunch of beasts that gave birth to sons without assholes right now. Ling Han passed on a message through the totem, announcing his return, and also recounting the whole story of this rebellion. His voice boomed and spread to every corner of the great Ling Empire. Long live our emperor! His Majesty has returned! The common people were all cheering endlessly. The common people were very honest. They did not care who became the emperor. As long as their own lives were good, that would be a good emperor. Ling Han had freed them from the fate of becoming a realm pill. This was a life-saving grace. He had brought them to the immortal realm, where spiritual chi was abundant. Though not everyone knew how to cultivate, in this kind of environment, not only would they not fall ill, their lifespan would also be extended. At least, living to 100 years old would not be a problem. This was also a great favor. Who would not love and respect such a good emperor? There were actually heartless beasts that wanted to seize power. Pay! Many people brought eggs, apples, and oranges. They were going to behead those traitors at the Meridian Gate. They were going to embarrass them, and make them infamy for 10,000 years. Ling Han summoned Yu Kaiyu, Qian Wuyong, Hu Fengyu, and other old friends of his from the past into the imperial palace. Previously, he did not want to reveal the secret of his return, so he did not meet with these old friends. Now that he had dealt with the trash of the 5 sects, he naturally had to meet with these people. He began to deliver alchemical pills to the major sects again. Chapter 8:16. Since this lord has returned, the king of the four seas obviously belongs to this lord, Helian Tianyun boasted shamelessly. Summon the whole world for this lord, let whoever from the Ao family immediately come and pay respects to this lord, and prepare to abdicate. If these words were heard by the martial artists of the Middle State, they'd definitely be dismissive, laughing at him as a madman. A mere gushing spring tear actually dared to make the ruler of the four seas abdicate. Wasn't this a huge joke? However, Helian Rong and the others didn't find it funny at all, and instead thought it was a matter of course. Lord Ancestral Dragon, what kind of supreme existence was that? Accepting the position of Sea Emperor was a matter of course, or else who dared to put the position above Ancestral Dragon? Wasn't this rebellion? Only Ling Han knew that this wasn't some ancestral dragon, but the strongest dragon from who knew how many millennia ago, reaching the height of alternative dragons. However, this alternative dragon was reborn with the tooth of a true dragon, and in terms of bloodline, it wasn't an exaggeration to call him a true dragon. Lord Ancestral Dragon, this human killed a dragon's descendant. I beg for Lord Ancestral Dragon's permission to let me kill him. Mo Yuan still refused to let Ling Han go. Helian Tianyun glared, and said, this human is the father of this lord's disciple, and is also this lord's brother. Do you want to kill this lord's brother? With such a glare, the dragon's might pervaded, extremely terrifying. Mo Yuan was instantly scared to the point of prostrating, and said, I dare not, I dare not. A dignified shattering void tear elite actually trembled like a sheep. This was impossible to happen in the human world. As the saying went, a warrior could be killed but not humiliated. To be able to reach the height of the shattering void tier, which one wasn't a genius, a king among kings? How could they bend? However, the sea race's success was due to bloodline, and their failure was also due to bloodline. With the addition of bloodline, the number of elites far exceeded the human race, but when it came to the battle of peak battle prowess, they couldn't compare. Not to mention others, just take the 8 kings of the Purple Moon Empire, which one of them could be fought by Helian Rong and Wenren Jie. The sea race had a great advantage in the number of elites, but when it came to peak battle prowess, the human race was stronger. The 1,000 Corpse sect knew, and even tossed out a 15-eyed Corpse king. What did the sea race have? In the sea race, the level of one's bloodline overpowered everything else. Even if Helian Tianyun's current strength was pitifully low, just his dragon's might alone was enough to make them tremble. Wasn't this enough to explain everything? Helian Rong's face twitched. Lord Ancestral Dragon had accepted his grandson as a disciple, so he naturally didn't dare to put his seniority above Ancestral Dragon. He didn't even dare to be of the same generation. Then, how should he address Ancestral Dragon and Ling Han? It's a mess. It's all a mess. Why haven't you scrammed yet? Helian Tianyun shouted. His small face was full of pride. Previously, he had been stifled for so long, and now, he could finally hold his head high for once. Mo Yuan hurriedly scrambled away, not daring to even let out a fart. Wenren Jia and Xian Yutong also didn't dare to talk nonsense, and left with their clansmen one after another. This Ling Han actually became Lord Ancestral Dragon's brother, who would still dare to have ideas against him. Xian Yutong was even more resentful. If he hadn't forcefully paired Ling Han and Xian Yu Kai together earlier, then he would be able to form a relationship with Lord Ancestral Dragon now. He regretted it to death. Xian Yu Kai also looked at Ling Han with a peculiar gaze. During the trip to the ghostly dragon cave, her impression of Ling Han had already changed greatly, and she even had a favorable impression of him after being saved by him. However, she never imagined that when Ling Han reappeared, he actually became Lord Ancestral Dragon's brother. Who knew how many beauties of the sea race wanted to marry Ling Han, and even she, this Pearl, could only be said to be climbing up the social ladder, completely losing the qualifications to be reserved. She sighed inwardly. This man never belonged to her, so she'd forget about him in the future. She followed Xian Yutong and left, yet tears uncontrollably flowed out of her eyes. Huh, why haven't you scrammed yet? Helian Tianyun looked at Helian Rong, somewhat puzzled that he actually didn't obey his orders. Helian Rong obviously didn't dare to disobey, but was pulled back by Ling Han, and didn't manage to leave. If it were before, he'd casually shake and push Ling Han to the side. If a shattering void tier elite wanted to leave, how could a puny deity transformation tier elite be qualified to stop him? But now, how could he dare to make a move against Ling Han? This was Lord Ancestral Dragon's brother, and if he made a move, it would be insubordination. Any member of the sea race could go on a punitive expedition against him. This was treason. What the sea race paid the most attention to was bloodline, just like how the AO family was the master of the four seas. Whoever disrespected them would be the enemy of the entire sea race. Seeing Lord Ancestral Dragon fly into a rage, Helian Rong hurriedly went towards Ling Han, meaning that since he pulled him back, now it was obviously up to him to explain. Ling Han coughed, and said, "Let me introduce you, this is my father-in-law, your disciple's grandfather. Additionally, his surname is also Helian, and he's called Helian Rong." Puhelian Tianyun instantly spat out a mouthful of water, directly hitting Helian Rong's face. Poor Helian Rong not only didn't dare to get angry, he didn't even dare to wipe it, and had to put on a smiling face. What, his surname is also Helian? Helian Tianyun had a bad feeling, and immediately pointed at Helian Sun Shua, and said, "Then what about her, is she also from the Helian family?" "Wrong, she's my wife. Marrying me means she's a member of the old Ling family," Ling Han said with a mischievous smile. Helian Tianyun instantly flew into a rage, and said, "Damn brat, you actually dare to set this lord up." Ling Jianxue was clearly his bloodline descendant, and there was no need to accept a disciple at all. That was his descendant. Now that this disciple was accepted, he and Ling Han would be equal in seniority. Wasn't it a huge loss? Originally, Ling Han would have to call him ancestor. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. Who asked him to be hot-headed when he saw that Ling Jianshue's bloodline was incomparably pure? Hu Niu was in a bad mood, and directly smacked his head, and said, "What, you're still in the same seniority as Niu? Do you know how amazing Lord Niu Niu is?" Helian Tianyun staggered from the hit, but facing Hu Niu, he didn't dare to have the slightest bit of temper, and only weakly said, "But this lord is their ancestor after all." "Ancestor what ancestor, believe it or not, Niu will beat you into ashes," Hu Niu said fiercely. Helian Tianyun instantly became a little wife, and didn't dare to make another sound. This little girl didn't know how to control her strength, and was completely reckless. He would rather offend Ling Han than this little demon girl. Helian Rong, on the other hand, was covered in cold sweat. A mere human actually dared to smack Lord Ancestral Dragon. This was treason. But even Lord Ancestral Dragon endured it, so how could he dare to step out? Did he think he was more awesome than Lord Ancestral Dragon? Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Father-in-law, this was the strongest warrior of the sea race back then, the alternative dragon that transformed into the ghostly dragon cave. At the same time, he was also the ancestor of the Helian family, and his name was Helian Tianyun." Shit. Helian Rong's expression immediately became extremely marvelous. He had never expected that the Lord Ancestral Dragon he thought of was actually the ancestor of the Helian family. Moreover, he was once the #1 expert of the sea race, an existence that had almost become a true dragon. This was also a gap in history. The existence of the ghostly dragon cave allowed the sea race to know that there was once such a powerful warrior, but the information about him was completely blank. This time, the seniority would be even more messed up. In a daze, Helian Rong thought so. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 8:17. While surprised, everyone still evacuated the island and headed towards Dome Cloud Island. It took 5 days on the road, and when they arrived, Hellion Tianyun broke through another major tier and became a spiritual ocean tier existence. Such cultivation naturally wouldn't be taken seriously by elites, but completing a breakthrough in just 5 days was an extremely astonishing thing. He estimated that in another 10 days, he would be able to cross into the spiritual pedestal tier, 1 month to flower blossom tier, 2 months to spiritual infant tier, 4 months to deity tier, and a year later to heaven tier, beginning to attack the shattering void tier. He was originally the world's #1 expert of that generation, and now his foundation could only be stronger. It wouldn't be surprising to return to the peak in the shortest time. Of course, all kinds of cultivation resources must keep up, or else it wouldn't be a matter of 1 year, but 10 or even 100 years. Under Hellion Tianyun's strong suggestion and request, Ling Han finally agreed to let his son stay in the sea race. He was just short of rolling on the ground begging. Ling Jianshui's true dragon bloodline was extremely pure, and with Hellion Tianyun's guidance from childhood, he could obtain the best growth. Although Hellion Sun Shui was reluctant, for the sake of her son's future, she could only let go. After all, the Great Ling Empire couldn't do without her governance, and if it was handed over to Ling Han, she wouldn't be at ease. Everything was for her son, she thought. After splitting open the sky, Ling Jianshui would be a second-generation master of the divine realm. Ling Han kept the largest true dragon bloodstone. According to Hellion Tianyun, Ling Jianshui's bloodline was pure enough, and the dragon's blood grass wouldn't be very helpful to him. Only the true dragon bloodstone could still play some role. Therefore, Ling Han left many other treasures in the Black Tower. Hellion Tianyun would concoct body-tempering potions for Ling Jianshui, ensuring that he would obtain the best conditions for growth. Ling Han was naturally at ease. Hellion Tianyun was the ancestor of the Hellion family, so how could he not think of his son? He and Hellion Sun Shui decided to come back a year later. By then, the medicinal ingredients left would be almost exhausted, and they would have to be replenished. Hellion Rong, on the other hand, threw the two out of Dome Cloud Island. He couldn't wait to brainwash Ling Jianshui. I'm your grandfather, the person who loves you the most in the world, closer than your parents. After the brainwashing was successful, wouldn't Ling Jianshui be a member of the Hellion family in the future? How could Ling Han not know what his father-in-law was thinking? He laughed in his heart. When his son was about 5 years old, he would definitely bring him back to his side. No matter how close a grandfather is, can he be compared to a father and mother? Both of them had their own thoughts. After laughing for a while, they turned around and left. Your and royal father's smiles are so fake. Hellion Xuanxue pointed out. You want to steal my son? So what if you're my father-in-law? Ling Han laughed. Hurry up and go back. I wonder if the court is in chaos after being away for so long. Hellion Xuanxue rolled her eyes at him and said, It's fine even if you don't go back for 100 years. If I don't go back, it will be a mess. Ling Han sweated and said, If you say that, I will feel very guilty. This trip could be said to be an unexpected harvest. With Hellion Tianyun keeping watch, the unification of the North Sea was a sure thing, but it was believed that the AO family wouldn't easily relinquish power, and would definitely question Hellion Tianyun's identity as the ancestor dragon, mobilizing all the forces of the 4 seas to go on a punitive expedition. Unfortunately, the sea race was a place that paid the most attention to bloodline. Hellion Tianyun's bloodline was indeed pure to the point of reaching the level of a true dragon, and calling him Lord Ancestor Dragon wasn't an exaggeration. Thus, the unification of the 4 seas was just around the corner, and it was far easier to deal with than the Middle States' 5 sections. He was originally worried that the alliance between the sea race and the Middle States' 5 sects would set off unexpected variables, but now it was the Middle States' 5 sects' turn to have a headache. The sea race had no lack of shattering void tier elites, and with Hellion Tianyun's command, they would definitely all be loyal. This was a force that could be completely united. For the first time, Ling Han felt that the act of splitting open the skies had made substantial progress. Next, it's to eliminate the 5 sects and the 1,000-corpse sect. Ling Han said inwardly. As long as these two forces were taken care of, then the world's peace would be just around the corner. After another few days, they returned to the desolate north. The ancient mining area of Fire Country had now become like hell on earth. Black fog rose up, turning into human figures that were screaming like malicious spirits. It was said that every night, this ghostly howl could be heard clearly even in the original imperial city, and it had already caused many people to move away from the imperial city. It was truly horrifying. And among those who stayed, they often fell sick, causing more and more people to choose to move away. Ling Han frowned. This was a variable. There were at least 100 shattering void tier elites buried underground, and they cultivated netherworld arts, wanting to borrow the Yin Qi underground to refine the bodies of living people into Yin corpses. The most important thing was that no one knew how powerful these people were. If they were on the same level as the sea race, then the sea race would be able to resist, but if every one of them was like the Lunar King, then it would be an extremely terrifying force. No matter, it's useless to think too much. I just have to improve my own strength, and no matter who they are, I can suppress them. They returned to the imperial city, and at this time, a large number of reports came from the front lines. Opening them, they were all reports of victory. The West region was basically unified, with the flag of the Great Ling Empire planted. Next was to consider the problem of attacking the East region or the South region. For the current Great Ling Empire, this wasn't a problem. Ling Han clearly felt that the power of the nation was stronger by a large margin. Firstly, because of the expansion of the territory and the increase of the citizens, and secondly, the image of the Great Ling Empire was deeply engraved in the hearts of the citizens, winning the approval of the masses. With the unity of the people, the nation's fortune naturally became stronger and stronger. He began to refine the true dragon bloodstone and blood locust tree heart. Although the largest piece was left in the North Sea, they later obtained a few more pieces in the ghostly dragon cave, and the harvest was quite bountiful. Containing the essence of dragon's blood, it was beneficial to everyone, but limited in quantity, and could only be refined by Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui. Only with them would such a treasure be able to display the most perfect effect. The dragon blood essence left behind by a 20 stars shattering void tier elite was awesome as expected. Ling Han's 9 dragons tyrant body art improved extremely quickly, and after only a dozen or so days, Ling Han discovered that his brute force touched the limit of the deity transformation tier. Next, he could first rush his body art to the heaven tier, which would also bring about a qualitative change in the indestructible heaven scroll, upgrading his physique to the level of 10th tier rare metal. In this way, there would be only a handful of people in the world that could hurt him. He made up his mind to rush his body art to the heaven tier as soon as possible. On this trip to the sea race, there was another major gain, and that was that he obtained the 10th level of the art. After his origin power level advanced to the peak of the heaven tier, he could change to this art and use it to rush to the shattering void tier. This art was obviously abducted from his father-in-law. With the face of Hellion Sun Shui and Ling Jian Shui, plus there was also Hellion Tianyun, the old ancestor, how could Hellion Rong refuse? Ling Han refined a lot of medicinal pills according to his own situation, allowing him to better adjust himself and improve the level of his body art. Another month later, he finally advanced his body art to the level of the heaven tier. And at this time, the elites of the Middle States' 5 great sects charged over again. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 8:18. The Middle States' 5 sects attacking was within Ling Han's expectations, so he was naturally not surprised. On the contrary, the 5 sects taking so long to send people over was a bit unexpected for Ling Han. Presumably, the pressure from the Purple Moon Empire was too great, causing the 5 sects to be unable to spare any manpower. He was a little expectant. Who would come? Ling Han walked out of the Imperial Palace, and saw a battleship parked above the Imperial Palace in the sky. A flag was inserted, drawing something that couldn't be distinguished whether it was an earthworm or a long snake. Earth Dragon Sect. True, he killed Jia Ming, so it was reasonable for the Earth Dragon Sect to dispatch elites to kill him. Such a minor character dares to establish a nation, truly ignorant. A cold voice came from the sky. This voice was a bit familiar. Beast Snake King Ling Han immediately recalled that when the 15-eyed Corpse King appeared, a total of 3 Shattering Void tier elites walked out from the 5 great sects, and among them, the Earth Dragon sect's elite was this Beast Snake King. Hee, bite me. Ling Han said with a smile. Lord Beast Snake King, can you allow me to fight this person first? Su Xiu Ran's voice came from the battleship. All right. This person should be considered your inner demon. If you kill this person, you can advance into the Shattering Void tier in the shortest time. And with your talent, plus the sect's full nurturing, it won't be difficult to charge into the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier in a dozen or so years, with battle prowess within reach, the Beast Snake King said. Although Su Xiu Ran wasn't the strongest genius in the history of the Absolute Saber sect, he was the only one who received the approval of the Absolute Saber sect. Precisely because of this, even the Beast Snake King had high expectations of him, or rather thought highly of him. After all, that ancestor of the Absolute Saber sect was still alive. Thank you, Lord. Su Xiu Ran leaped out from the battleship, stood in the air, and said, Ling Han, let's fight to our heart's content without external help. Ling Han shook his head, and said, you're a bit shameless. You're obviously already at the peak stage of the heaven tier, yet say you want to have a good fight with me. I really don't know what's wrong with your brain. He smiled and said, however, if I don't fight with you, you will think that I am afraid of you. Xiu, he soared into the air, standing side by side with Su Xiu Ran, and said, come, I am the Emperor of the Great Ling Empire, a mere clown, how can I suppress you? Su Xiu Ran snorted coldly, and said, what Great Ling Empire's Emperor, you're nothing but a fake king. Today, I will behead you with my saber, and what Great Ling Empire will there be? Ling Han scratched his ear and said, how many times have you said that you want to kill me? I'm sick of hearing it. Can't you change it to something new? Then die. Su Xiu Ran flew up and slashed at Ling Han with his invincible blade. There was nothing fancy about this slash, it was just fast. Xiu, the saber seemed to have just been brandished, but it had already slashed in front of Ling Han. The saber light was dazzling, as if heaven and earth had just been created. This Su Xiu Ran really couldn't be small. It had only been a few days, yet his strength had made astonishing progress again. It was not his cultivation but his combat prowess. His comprehension of the Saber Dao had improved significantly. Wang, the Revere Life Sword in Ling Han's hand trembled as if it was about to fly out of his hand. Dao Xn Ling Han smiled faintly. His sword heart moved, and the Revere Life Sword immediately stabilized. He raised his sword to parry, clang, just in time to parry Su Xiu Ran's slashing blade. If it had been any other deity transformation tier, or even celestial tier, their heads might have been chopped off by this blade in a blur. It was so fast that they couldn't block it at all. He could even see the shadow of the saber with his eyes. However, his movements were too slow and he was unable to parry the attack. He could only use his origin energy to defend himself. However, Ling Han was a body cultivator. Additionally, his body techniques had also reached the sky human stage. Thus, blocking the attack was a piece of cake for him. The saber and the sword clashed, bursting forth with boundless radiance that was as dazzling as the sun. Ling Han pushed forcefully, and Peng, Su Xiu Ran was sent flying by him. He cracked a smile and said, "This slash is fast, but it doesn't seem to have enough power." Nonsense, power and speed couldn't be had at the same time. This slash of his was extremely fast, so it was naturally lacking in power. This was also because Su Xiu Ran knew that Ling Han's body techniques were strange, which was why he specifically practiced swift blades. However, he didn't expect that Ling Han wouldn't play by the rules and actually didn't dodge or evade, playing hard with him. He flipped over and stabilized his figure. He raised the absolute saber horizontally, his gaze awe-inspiring. Endless saber will circulated within his body, turning into substance and surging out, forming tens of thousands of sabers around him. There were all kinds of them, all condensed from saber will. This couldn't harm the physical body, but it could slash the soul, which was very frightening. Enlightened sword heart could slash the soul, and enlightened saber heart naturally could as well. Then take another slash from me, Su Xiu Ran said coldly. His expression was solemn, and the absolute saber danced slightly, creating ripples. Splitting wind blade. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. The power of this slash was indeed frightening. He also raised the Revere Life sword horizontally in front of his chest. The mysterious 3000 sword will circulated, and similarly, there was a great power spreading out. Huh! On the warship, the Beast Snake King couldn't help but let out a soft cry of surprise. How powerful of a being he was, he naturally immediately realized that Ling Han's sword will give him a sense of déjà vu. This is the 3 styles of black origin. This was one of the ultimate techniques of the Heaven Sword sect, and he was no stranger to it. Su Xiu Ran gave a light shout, and brandished the absolute saber to launch an attack. Suddenly, heaven and earth lost all color, leaving only absolute darkness. Only the absolute saber emitted endless light, sweeping towards Ling Han. Even if Ling Han opened his eyes, he wouldn't be able to see where Su Xiu Ran was. He could only see that resplendent blade slashing towards him. Not a person, only a blade. Ling Han was fearless. He simply closed his eyes, and only used his spirit. Sword heart. The corner of his mouth curled into a smile, and he brandished his sword, unleashing 3100 resplendent sword lights. Each sword light was swift and fierce, slashing towards Su Xiu Ran. In theory, 10,000 techniques return to 1 was the strongest single-target killing move, while the mysterious 3000 was used to deal with group attacks. Because the power was dispersed, its destructive power was naturally inferior to 10,000 techniques return to 1. But Ling Han was too strong now, and added with the sharpness of the Revere Life sword, even the power of 1 slash was enough to pose a huge threat to Su Xiu Ran. Then, the effects of using the mysterious 3000 would naturally be better, as it could expand the range of attack. Both sides clashed with ultimate techniques right from the start. Boom! The sword light and the saber light collided, forming a huge explosion in the sky. For a moment, everyone was blinded and deafened. All they could see was a vast expanse of whiteness, and only a buzzing sound was left in their ears. When the light and shadow dissipated, Su Xiu Ran had already retreated over 1,000 feet. There were a total of 5 places on his body that were bleeding, and he couldn't stop no matter what. How could a wound cut by the Revere Life sword be stopped just like that? On Ling Han's body, there were also 3 places where his clothes were sliced open, but his physique was as warm as jade, and no matter how one looked at it, it couldn't be seen where he was injured. After his physical arts advanced into the heaven tier, his physique also rose another level, reaching the height of 10th tier rare metal. In the hands of a shattering void tier elite, the absolute saber should be able to leave a mark on 10th tier rare metal, but if it were Su Xiu Ran, it was obviously impossible. The difference of a hair's breadth was like the difference between heaven and earth. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 8:19. It was clear that Ling Han was not very good at coming up with names. One could tell just from the names he had come up with before. It was practically too horrible to look at. It's godly metal now, but it could possibly become divine metal in future, so let's call it Divine God's Sword. Ling Han thought for a while, and suddenly lost interest. He very casually gave this divine sword a name. However, isn't the Divine Demon Sword more domineering? Let's just call it Divine Demon Sword. Ling Han was very unprincipled, and he was really very bad at coming up with names. He chuckled as he slashed to his heart's content, causing the divine demon sword to continuously grow. With each slash, the divine demon sword would advance slightly, but this advancement was very slow. If it really wanted to complete the qualitative change from level 1 to level 2, it would need the support of a vast amount of godly metal. Thankfully, to me now, level 1 godly metal really isn't that valuable. Let's just burn money for me. Ling Han slashed for a total of 3 days and 3 nights in the Black Tower, and the amount of level 1 godly metal that he had slashed into pieces was innumerable. During this time, he had also left once to replenish a large amount of godly metal. Finally, after 3 days, the divine demon sword welcomed a qualitative change. It had advanced to the level of level 2 godly metal. Ling Han discovered that in this process of qualitative change, the divine demon sword's capacity to accommodate his martial intent had also reached a peak. In a short instant, 7 divine patterns had actually been engraved on the body of the sword. This caused Ling Han to be incredibly delighted. One had to realize that wanting to use one's own martial intent to leave an imprint on a weapon in the form of a divine pattern was an extremely long process. After all, it was activated by one's will, and not origin power. Thus, nurturing a god tool would take at least a few decades or even a century. However, when the divine demon sword underwent a qualitative change, it was as if it had become a blank piece of paper that Ling Han could draw on as he pleased. In an instant, 7 divine patterns had been engraved on the sword. How could Ling Han not be elated by this? Right now, the toughness of the sword has reached the level of level 2 godly metal, and the might of the divine demon sword has reached the level of a level 1 god tool. This meant that if he didn't activate the divine sword, and only used his own power to slash, the divine demon sword would be an ordinary level 2 god tool, and not a god tool. However, if he activated the might of the divine demon sword, he would be able to unleash the battle prowess of a level 1 god tool. I still have to continue to improve it until it's equivalent to my power. Otherwise, if it clashed with a level 3 or level 4 god tool, it was extremely likely that it would be sliced in half, and he would have to find Jin Zhihui to repair it. Otherwise, if he randomly reconnected it, it was possible that he would destroy the special characteristics of the devouring metal. Otherwise, why would Jin Zhihui be in such a difficult position, and spend over 10,000 years to forge this divine demon sword? But I'm out of money, I'm so poor, sigh. Previously, when he had bought level 1 godly metal, he had practically used up all his savings. Even if he still had a few true origin stones left now, how many pieces of level 2 godly metal could he buy? No wonder Small Tower had said that there was only a theoretical possibility that the devouring metal could transform into divine metal. In the end, he would probably have to find all the level 20 godly metal in the whole immortal realm, and only then would he be able to make the devouring metal complete the final leap. Oh, that's right, doesn't the Black Tower also produce godly metal? The Black Tower could produce a piece of godly metal every year, just like how it produced spirit stones. However, if this piece of godly metal wasn't taken away, then its quality would increase by a certain amount every year. This caused Ling Han to hesitate. That was because even 100 pieces of low-grade godly metal couldn't compare to a single piece of high-grade godly metal. Forget it. In any case, the amount of level 2 godly metal that I need is vast, so I'll just give up on this idea, Ling Han thought. Ling Han said in his heart. As a person, one had to set their sights further. If I don't have money, then I'll just have to desperately concoct alchemical pills. Ling Han decided to slow down the progress of his cultivation. In any case, he had the reincarnation tree, and 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to a year of meditation for others. Moreover, he also had the demonic power source, so he didn't need to worry about accumulating origin power before he reached the Sun-Moon tier. Indeed, he could spend some time on alchemy. He desperately concocted alchemical pills as he waited for the majestic heaven sect to accept him as a disciple. Shui Yanyu frequently came here to cultivate, and she wanted to increase her cultivation level as much as possible. Naturally, she was borrowing the light of the reincarnation tree. Her goal was very clear, and that was to be chosen by the majestic heaven sect and be together with Ling Han. Otherwise, who knew how long it would be before she could see this damn pervert again. Moreover, this guy's brilliance definitely couldn't be concealed no matter where he went. She had to keep a close eye on him, lest some other woman took advantage of the situation and snuck in. However, she didn't have very high cultivation talent, and her battle prowess was also only 2 stars. In the Scarlet Heaven Academy, this would be very impressive, but the disciples that the majestic heaven sect accepted were all outstanding elites from over 100 great planets. 2 stars was definitely not enough. Thus, if she wanted to enter the majestic heaven sect, she would have to rely on something else. Age and cultivation level. Mountain River tier cultivators were definitely not rare in the majestic heaven sect. However, those who were below the age of 40 and had reached the high extreme of the Mountain River tier, or even the consummate level, even if they didn't have any battle prowess that surpassed their cultivation level, they could still be classified as supreme prodigies. My battle prowess was not as strong as yours, but my cultivation speed was faster than yours, and my cultivation level far surpassed yours. Thus, I could still suppress you. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. He wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty, and said, "Wife, I'm very touched by your sincerity. Come, give me a kiss." Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him, and said in annoyance, "I only want to enter the majestic heaven sect to improve myself." What does that have to do with you? This woman was really thin-skinned. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Wife, oh, wife, this is your bad point. You're always unwilling to admit that you've been conquered by me. However, that's fine. I like to slowly train you, and I enjoy this process." "Ah!" Shui Yenyu exclaimed in astonishment. This guy was making his moves on her again. Furthermore, there was no need to think about it. He was definitely occupying her 2 high points. She was both embarrassed and annoyed, and said, "Damn pervert, don't be like this. Don't be like this." Ling Han chuckled. In truth, Shui Yenyu's breasts were also filled with beauty. The curves of her breasts were so voluptuous that his desire was aroused. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand, and knead them until they were continuously changing shape. A terrifying fluctuation rippled out, causing the 2 of them to falter at the same time. They looked up into the sky. The bright moon hung high in the sky, but amidst the twinkling stars, a large star suddenly appeared, exuding an astonishing light. No, it was more like a fountain, spewing out brilliant light that illuminated the sky. Boom! Another wave of intense palpitations spread out. For some reason, the 2 of them were sure that this was coming from that large star, and had something to do with the light it was spewing out. What kind of star is this? Could it be that it has reached the end of its life, and is about to release its final brilliance? The immortal realm was completely different from a small world. A small world only had a single continent, and the stars in the sky were actually multiple meteors that elites could easily shake off. But in the immortal realm, every star was a large star, or even a sun, burning with divine flames that could burn heavenly body tier elites to ashes. Even great elites of the eternal river tier did not dare to enter. Every large star had its own lifespan, but it could be as long as billions or even tens of billions of years. Even elites of the heavenly body tier would find it difficult to reach the end of a large star's life. However, it was said that when a large star died in the end, there would be a great explosion. That was extremely frightening. Just think about how many cultivators could be born from a large star, and this power would burst forth in the short time of a few breaths. Probably even heavenly body tier elites would only be insta-killed. This was power that could destroy the world, and probably only Genesis tiers could resist it. And now, a large star in the sky suddenly blossomed with brilliant light, and it was extremely possible that it had reached the end of its life. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.